Sai, are you ready? Can you start now?
Yeah, sure, madam.
Thank you. A warm welcome to everyone. I cordially invite you all for this International Virtual Symposium on scope of PharmD in new normal, opportunities in home and abroad. We hope that now we are at the end of COVID-19 pandemic situation. More than ever before, the COVID-19 pandemic placed pharmacists on the front line of healthcare. This pandemic will lead to increase the scope of practice. With this context, we plan to conduct this international symposium. This symposium aimed to showcase the opportunities for PharmD students in India as well as in abroad. The expert's perspective on career in the new normal period, how this is going to be a challenge or how this is going to use or how this is creating an opportunity for PharmD graduate especially. For this aim, with this aim, we have planned this international symposium, and I cordially inviting our speakers, Professor G.P. Mohanta, Professor and Head of Department of Pharmacy, Annamalai University, Chidambaram, Tamil Nadu, and Dr. M. Sai Priya, Registered Pharmacist, Texas, USA. Proudly we are saying here, she is our alumni, the second batch student of PharmD of Chalpati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. And Mr. Rajesh Talaparambat, Manager, Inpatient Medication Service, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Today we are having 3 speakers from different areas. This is a good opportunity for the PharmD students. You can interact well with them. You can clarify your doubts regarding your career. I hope that this opportunity will create some idea in your mind how you can be proceed after this pandemic situation. So with this brief introduction, I'm welcoming all our speakers. So before that, I would like to thank our principal, Professor Nadanla Ramarao Garu, for giving us these much of opportunities to conducting this type of symposium, conferences, seminar, whatever it may be, for his continuous support and encouragement for actively involving with these type of activities, and also to our management for providing all the facilities to conducting of this type of activities. Thank you everyone, and I'm welcoming you all for this International Virtual Symposium. Now I would like to call Ms. Vapna, intern, Chalpati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences, to read the brief profile of Dr. M. Sai Priya.
Very good morning, everyone. Let me introduce Dr. M. Sai Priya, ma'am, PharmD MS Registered Pharmacist, Texas, US. Ma'am is an outstanding alumni student of Chalapati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. Regarding educational background, ma'am pursued PharmD graduation from Chalapati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences and they later did Masters in Clinical Research Administration, Health and Health Services from Eastern Michigan University. And parallelly, ma'am cleared most prestigious pharmacy graduate licensing exams of United States like FPGEC, followed by NAPLEX and MPJE Texas. When we see the experience, ma'am have demonstrated experience as pharmacist in both inpatient and ambulatory care settings, and ma'am started her career as assistant professor at Chalpati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences and later worked as graduate research assistant at Eastern Michigan University. And ma'am also played a role as pharmacist intern at White Rose Pharmacy. Regarding achievements, ma'am is a recipient of National Scholars Program Scholarship and received full fee waiver from Eastern Michigan University to pursue MS. Ma'am presented 7 posters and also attended several workshops and awarded Best Poster Awards too. Ma'am received the Best Student Award for 4 academic years at Chalpati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. Thank you, ma'am. Really so happy to see you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for introducing me to our audience, Ms. Swapna. And thank you so much for inviting me as a speaker for this international symposium. And is that okay if I get started with my presentation now?
So, yes,
Ma'am.
you can share your PPT and start your presentation.
Sure.
Just a minute. Yes. Okay.
So today we are going to focus on getting licensure as a pharmacist in the United States of America. In this first slide, you can see the picture which shows a long roadway, and at the end, you can see the bright light in there. The purpose of adding this picture is to let you all know that getting a pharmacist licensure in the States is a really long pathway which you have to go through a lot of hard times and difficulties before you see the bright light after you become a pharmacist here. Now, today, I'm going to discuss about each and every step that you need to take before you get your license in the United States. So, getting licensed is not an overnight thing. It doesn't happen in a day or two. In general, people say that it takes almost 2 to 4 years to get licensed as a pharmacist. Once you are here in the United States, it might take anywhere from 2 years until 6 years, or it might be 8 years or 10 years, depending upon how well you perform during your boards. So, as it says, your pharmacist dream will definitely come true, but it absolutely takes a lot of your time, your dedication, your effort, and above all, you need to be very patient enough and wait until you clear all the steps to become a pharmacist here. As I'm telling you again, these exams, all the steps are not easy at all. In fact, they are breathtaking. You need to invest both of your time and money and your dedication in order to get licensed here. So, my suggestion is if at all you want to start this process, start it in a very serious and planned way. Unless you do it this way, it is both waste of your time as well as money. And again, the route to become pharmacist in the
Sai
United
Priya,
States. Yes,
sorry to interrupt. Please, you put your slides on slideshow.
slideshow.
Yes, just you make enable editing of your PPT. In the down, you can maximize it. Or just press F5.
Is it okay?
Yes, now it's okay.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
So, in continuation of this, the route is not always easy. It has a lot of bumps and pitfalls in it. So, you need to be prepared to be strong enough with a positive attitude to walk through the way until you get licensed. In this presentation, I'm going to give a brief overview of what a pharmacist's life looks like when you start your job as a pharmacist in the United States. And also the rest of the presentation includes each and every step that you need to pass through before you get licensed. So pharmacist in United States is a pharmacist profession in United States is a greatly respected and appreciated profession. So you are considered, your job is considered as equal as a physician's job in the States. From a layman person to every single member of the healthcare team will give you equal respect. And also you will develop good relationships with your patients, especially myself being a community pharmacist. I have developed really good relationships with my patients, and this will keep you motivated throughout your job life to continue to do your best at your work. And a pharmacist job is a very occupied profession. You need to work around the clock. It's a 24 by 7 job. If you are working in a hospital, then you have to work a 24-hour shifts, a night shift for a couple of weeks, or whenever they need you or whenever your patients need you. And also here in the United States, patient safety, when it comes to patient safety, it is always a hand-on-hand balance between a physician and a pharmacist. And being a pharmacist, you will make a big difference in the patient's quality of life, and also you are the responsible healthcare professional in regards to patient safety. And also, there is flexibility in your career path, which means you can work as a community pharmacist, and also you can work as a hospital pharmacist. Also, you have good opportunities to work in industry as well. So, pharmaceutical industry is an innovating field in the United States. So, if at all you want to switch your career from patients, from taking care of the patients or improving patients' quality of life, you can always go to the industry and involve in research and development as well. Coming to the salaries, pharmacists in United States usually do not worry about salaries because you get a rewarding pay. Your pay scale usually starts at 120,000 an annum, and it can go up to 250,000 per annum. So it always depends upon what kind of pharmacy job you are working and also what kind of stress levels you're having. So it always depends, and you will be rewarded really great. You cannot even imagine. And also, being a pharmacist, you will be learning all the new innovations that are happening in the pharmacy world. Unlike in India, here in the United States, every single innovation will be used in the healthcare market. Say, for instance, there is a new drug called Bidurion, which can treat diabetes. Once it passed the clinical trials, physicians will start using it, and the pharmacists will start dispensing it, which means, in other words, when you are dispensing a new drug to the patient, you have to learn about the drug. So you will be pushed to learn innovative drug molecules, to learn about the innovative treatment strategies, to learn new treatment protocols every single day. And also, manufacturers will start sending you their drug information things, such as pharmacists today, US pharmacists, and about the recalls that they had. So every single day at your work, you will be a student, you will be a learner. You will have an opportunity to learn every single thing when you are at work. So to me, being a pharmacist after I pass all the hurdles is a soulful satisfaction. And I'm pretty sure that after you do everything else like me, you will get that too. So let's start with the application process and the governing bodies in the United States, especially in regarding pharmacy profession. So as if we have Indian Board of Pharmacy or Pharmacy Council of India, for India, in United States, it is called National Association of Boards of Pharmacy, which is abbreviated as NABP. So NABP is a federal board which regulates pharmacy profession in all the 50 states of United States of America. So this is like a big boss thing in the United States. And if at all you want to get licensed in United States, this is your to-go place. This is your home place to look at. NABP website is the first thing that you need to read through before you start your process at all. And the second governing body is the State Board of Pharmacy. First, the federal body is NABP. Under this federal body, there are different state bodies, different state boards. Say, for instance, I am a pharmacist in the state of Texas. So my pharmacist license or my pharmacist intern license, everything regarding my pharmacy profession will be under the control of Texas State Board of Pharmacy, because I am a pharmacist who is registered in Texas. Say, for instance, I am a Texas pharmacist. I cannot go to a different state and show up there and cannot practice pharmacy in there. So every single state has particular stipulations and regulations. So a pharmacist in that particular state can only practice pharmacy in that state, not in other states. As I told you before, NABP is a to-go place for everyone to look at before you start your licensing process. Let me show you how this website looks like. This is the website, which is called National Association of Boards of Pharmacy. Before you start your process, your examination process, you need to create an e-profile for NABP. So everyone will have their own e-profile. You need to start creating an e-profile here. And especially in regarding to the programs that are offered by NABP, you need to hit on the programs button and then go to examination section. This is where you see FPGC and FPGE. If we go in depth in there, you can see the application bulletin. Download the application bulletin today itself and start reading through it. Read the application bulletin for at least 2 to 3 times before you start your application process with the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy. In these 2 links, you can get all the information for the examinations. And if you see in here, this pre-NAPLEX and pre-MPJ and pre-FPGE are the sample examination tests that you can take before you sit for the actual exam. Once if you pass these exams, the pre-test, then it is almost 90% sure that you can also pass the actual examinations. So these are the pre-examinations that you need to pay for those. Those are not really expensive, but would really help you to test your abilities before you actually sit for the exam. Let's go back to our slides. So first, now we are at application process. So in order to start your application process, you need to go through National Association of Boards of Pharmacy and start reviewing that material. So you will get a brief idea of how to do the next steps. So in order to understand that, you need to create an e-profile before that, as I discussed before. So next thing is the first and foremost step in the application process is that you have to apply for educational credential evaluation. This is a third-party agency which works for NABP. What this agency does is it will evaluate your Indian degree, your Indian transcripts, and your Indian pharmacist license, and evaluate you that you are equal to a PharmD student or the PharmD degree in the United States. So you need to get this evaluation done before you start your application with NABP. So for this ECE evaluation, there are a list of documents that you need to submit to them. So these list of documents are again available on NABP website. You need to look through those first. So for this evaluation, there are different kinds of evaluations, but NABP specifically requires you to do an evaluation called General Evaluation Report, for which you need to pay $150 to get it done. This is the first step. So you need to evaluate your Indian degree with a third-party agency called Educational Credential Evaluation. This agency will make sure that your PharmD degree in India is equivalent to PharmD degree in the United States, and will let NABP know, the federal government agency know that, hey, this candidate has this particular degree, so you can allow this candidate to sit for FPGE, is what this evaluation report says. And then when you are applying, so once after EC evaluation is done, you need to apply for FPGE. So this FPGE application itself costs $550. This amount is non-refundable, which means once after you are submitting application to NABP, you will never receive your money back. Once NABP receives your application and the check for $550, that's it. It is a non-refundable amount, and you need to make sure that you send all the documentation that are mentioned in the NABP site to FPGE. If you don't submit any of the applications, or if you missubmit your application, your fee will not be refunded. Your application will be done. You might not get qualified to sit for FPGE. I would highly recommend you all people to start your application process at least 1 year ahead of time. So if you misapply or if you fail to apply it properly, then you will have enough time to reapply for it again. There are many people who I knew of did not properly submit their application, and their time lapsed for almost an year before they sit for the exam. This is a very important part. Documentation or the paperwork is really important. I'm stressing on it a lot more because most of the people fail at this step. So to be in a preventive approach, to take a preventive approach, you need to start your process at least 1 year ahead of time. And then once after you apply for FPGE, NABP will evaluate your application and will give you an acceptance letter to sit for FPGE exam. So after you receive this acceptance letter, you need to pay a fee of $650 to write or to sit for FPGE. Once if you pass the test, that is fine. If you do not pass the test in your first attempt, then you have to retake the exam, for which the fees is $750. So coming to the actual exam, FPGE, this exam is only offered once during a academic year. Say for instance, this year is 2020. During this 2020, exam for FPGE is offered on October 7th. So in the entire United States, there are many Pearson VUE test centers in which on October 7th, FPGE will be offered for the candidates who are qualified to sit for the exam. It was different a couple years before, where FPGE was offered twice a year. But from now on, it is only offered once a year. 2020 is not really a good year for international pharmacy graduates, is what I can say, because they changed many of their timelines, and also they changed their exam stipulations during this period of time. From 2020, there are many regulations that got changed, especially for foreign graduates. The first and foremost thing is FPGE from now on is only offered once in a year. It's only in the fall. And this year it is on October 7th. And if you miss this attempt, then you will be able to sit for FPGE only next year in the fall. Fall is a season which falls after August. So if you miss an exam this year, you have to wait for one whole year to sit for the exam again. And also the second change that they made was before that, candidates can take FPGE or TOEFL in either of the orders. So if you would like to sit for FPGE first, you can start with FPGE. If you don't like taking FPGE, then you will have an option to take TOEFL first. So you can do it either ways. But now they made a mandatory regulation that every single foreign graduate should pass TOEFL first and then they have to pass FPGE. So they have a stipulated order now. You have to pass TOEFL and then you can sit for FPGE. As you all know, TOEFL is only valid for 2 years. So if you pass TOEFL on October 21st, 2020, then your TOEFL will be expired on October 20th, 2022. So you only have 2 years of time to pass FPGE. If you are not able to pass FPGE within these 2 years of time, then you have to retake TOEFL, pass TOEFL, and then take FPGE in the next 2 years. Only then you will get FPGEC, which is Foreign Pharmacy Graduate Equivalency Certification. So as you see this certification is issued only for the candidates who pass both FPGE and TOEFL. So you need to get these two exams done within the first 2 years. You have to pass TOEFL first and then get your FPGE exam passed within 2 years of the TOEFL pass date. Only then you will be issued FPGEC, which is Foreign Pharmacy Graduate Equivalency Examination. And again, TOEFL is not an easy exam. FPGE is not an easy exam either. So you have a very strict stipulation here to get those two exams done. And again, FPGE will only have 5 attempts in your lifetime. If you don't pass FPGE in 5 attempts, then you have to drop your dream of becoming a pharmacist in the States. You can no longer take the exam. And regarding these stipulations and timelines, you can go to the NAPP website and read through it completely. And I would suggest you to read it at least 2 to 3 times before you apply for the exam. And this is not a very important point to discuss now, but the thing is, if you are a graduate before 2003, you can apply for NABP to sit for these exams even with a B.Pharm degree. A B.Pharm degree is allowed before 2003, but after 2003, a 5-year degree is mandatory to apply for these board exams in the United States. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, now I'm going to discuss how FPGA exam is. So to me personally, I was having a hard time because I never had anyone who took the exam before. So I never had proper guidance before. I was preparing by myself. I was watching some YouTube videos, or I was asking the customer service representatives who work at NABP to get more information. The thing is, you need to know really well about the exam before you actually start preparing it. That will save you time and will have you to get a clear idea about where to focus on and how to prepare. That's what I'm going to discuss now. So this FPGE is a typical exam, which is a comprehensive test of 4 sections. So these 4 sections include basic biomedical sciences, pharmaceutical sciences, social, administrative, and behavioral sciences, and clinical sciences. So now let me explain you how the exam is designed. Not only FPGE, but until you pass NAPLEX and NPJE, these exams are designed in such they will qualify people who fit for a job position as a pharmacist. So they will test you in each and every area and each and every corner. FPGA exam contains a total of 250 questions, which are from these 4 areas. And the important thing that you need to know is you need to pass every single area of the test. Say, for instance, you did a really good job on 33% pharmaceutical sciences, but you did very poorly on your clinical sciences, then you will not pass your test. They will give you a score of 74 and say that you failed the exam. The minimum pass score for this exam is 75, but I have seen many people failing the exam at a score of 74. I have seen people who took multiple attempts and ended up getting 74. This is because you need to get equal scores on all the 4 sections. Like you need to pass the 10% of basic medical sciences, 33% of pharmaceutical sciences, 22% of administrative sciences, and 35% of clinical sciences. If at all you miss any of the one section, if at all you fail in any of the one section, your total exam will be a failure. They will not give you a pass score. 75 is a minimum pass score, and anything above 85 is considered excellent, and anything towards 100 is a cream score. And another important thing in this exam is, out of these 250 questions, 50 questions are dummy questions. They are experimental questions, and you will not able to understand, or you don't know where these 50 questions are mixed throughout the exam. Say, for example, you answered a question really great. That was a super tough question, but you answered it correctly. You know the concept in that question, but if that question is an experimental question, unfortunately, you will not get grade for that question, and the score for that question will be 0 at the end of the exam. So you don't know where those 50 questions are. They will be mixed throughout the exam. And out of those 200 questions, they will segregate your score into 4 different sections. And if you pass all the 4 sections, only then you will pass the entire examination. If not, you will be disqualified in the examination and you have to resit for it. So now I'm going to discuss briefly about each and every section and what you need to cover, how to prepare for this, and what are the books that I referred and what are the books that I would suggest you to refer. Is that what I'm going to discuss in the next future slides. So far, if you have any questions, you can ask me. Does anybody have any questions so far?
No, ma'am.
Can we move forward?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure. So basic biomedical sciences, as you saw before, it is just 10% of the exam. It doesn't really include much, but you have to pass the section 2. So first is physiology. They don't really ask much questions, and personally, I did not get many questions from this particular section. But what people emphasize is you need to know really well about renal physiology, reproductive systems, digestive system, and you need to have basic idea about every single thing. But renal physiology is really, really important. They'll ask you about renal anatomy, physiology, and the area of drug mechanism of action, where which particular drug acts in the renal system is what they usually ask for. But I cannot really, so the things that I'm going to discuss right now are the things which I heard from many people, which I heard from my colleagues, or which I heard from my other international graduates when they took the exam. So these are just to give you an idea, but I cannot promise you that this will be the thing that's going to be in the exam. This session, whatever I'm discussing from now on, you will see what kind of questions you might get and what are the reference materials that you need to use throughout your preparation to get yourself prepared to sit for the exam. And next is the biochemistry. Biochemistry, they really do concentrate on metabolic pathways of various things like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and DNA and RNA. Among these all, to me, that I observed during my exam was they will ask you a lot of questions on protein metabolism, especially. Say, for instance, They might ask you about the primary, secondary, and tertiary structures of proteins, and also they'll concentrate on amino acids, essential amino acids, non-essential amino acids, and specifically they might also ask you about sulfur containing and non-sulfur containing amino acids and those kind of questions. Physiology, all this 10% is just basic information. You won't get too tricky or too difficult questions. You will get questions in a moderate level or moderate intensity, which are actually doable in the exam. So what I would say is, instead of going through intense difficult range, you start getting your preparation at a medium range and then go to a higher intensity. That way you can cover at least 50% of the exam questions, and you will have a higher pass rate instead of losing the exam in your first attempt. So go through all the basics. So whenever you start preparing a chapter, first read about the basics or understand the basics, and then you go from there on, and then you start doing a level up, and then go to the difficult range at the end. So better start with easy topics when you are preparing for the exam, so that you'll get yourself involved in the preparation, and also you will be more enthusiastic by the time you take the exam. Don't start with something which is very difficult for you to prepare, or which is very difficult for you to learn, because it will definitely disappoint you, and you won't be able to move forward in your preparation. So now moving on to microbiology related to human diseases. Among all these four, what I would say is microbiology and immunology are most important things. So in microbiology, they will ask you from the basics. Like they will ask you about the differences between eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells, and they will also cover different kind of microorganisms and their basic properties, like basic properties of bacteria, virus, fungi. And also in bacteria, they'll ask you about gram-positive organisms, gram-negative organisms, and the differences between those two, and the tests that we do in the microbiology laboratory to identify which is gram-positive and which is gram-negative, as well as a disease-specific microorganism. Say, for instance, what is the microorganism that is involved in causing shingles? That might be your exam question. Or sometimes they'll ask you about specific antibiotic against a specific microorganism. So that might be a question too. And also, as I told you before, FPGE will mainly concentrate on fundamental basics. The question that I got from microbiology is that they asked me about lag phase and stationary phase in bacterial cell growth graph. So those questions, I have never expected to get those questions. I have prepared a lot about disease-specific organisms, antibiotics, and everything else. I prepared in depth in microbiology is what I felt like. But the questions that I got were really basic fundamentals. And during my exam, I really had a hard time to really answer those questions. But those are very basic enough. So you cannot actually tell what kind of questions you get, but you need to make yourself very much prepared from the basic bottom level to the top difficult levels. So you need to have a wide range of ideology when you are preparing the exam. And next comes immunology. So in immunology, they'll obviously discuss about innate immunity, adaptive immunity, non-specific immune responses, and antigen-antibody relationships, and different types of antigen molecules and antibody structures, all these kind of things. You have to have an in-depth idea about immunology. Immunology, especially, it plays an important role in NAPLEX, but also in FPGE, they will cover almost 30% of what we learned in PharmD. Entire FPGE, you will get questions from year 1 to year 6. So they cover every single thing. You need to have idea about every topic and every subject and every topic. And so you get questions Sometimes you feel like in the exam, have you, you definitely feel like you have ever went through this topic in your entire degree of PharmD. You might also get asked those questions, but at the same time, you will get questions that are very basic. So if you can prepare in such a way that you don't miss any of the basic questions, then it is of higher chance of passing than missing the exam. So start preparing from now on. Pay attention to every single subject that you're studying. And also, if you're in your 5th or 6th years, just whenever you get a chance, go back to your previous year topics or syllabus and keep going through that, so that you won't miss any of the you won't miss the touch with the subject. It's very hard for everyone to go through everything at the end or just before 2 to 3 months before the exam. Instead of doing that, you can touch base on every single topic whenever you get a chance when you are in India. I will discuss why I'm stressing this on, why I'm stressing you guys to prepare ahead of time, because you will not have enough time once you are here in the United States. So you better start preparing from now itself. So this is the major part. Pharmaceutical sciences covers almost 33% of the exam. And also the first and foremost thing is medicinal chemistry. For medicinal chemistry, in the exam, you will get more than 25 to 30 questions. And these 30 questions are the ones that I can say the most difficult ones in the exam. Uh, they might ask you, like, they will give you 10 different structures and will ask you to point out which one is etenolol. So you need to have basic idea about acidic and basic properties of the drugs, basic drug pharmacophores, and you also need to know structure activity relationships for specific pharmacophores. Say for instance, personally, I got a question on SAR for benzodiazepines. So for benzodiazepines, you need to know which carbon atom has which carbon atom substitution will increase or decrease the activity of the drug. Say a C2 carbon should be sp2 hybridized for a benzodiazepine to show its activity. So that you need to know that. And also, if you add a specific group on the C3 carbon, say for instance, if you add a hydroxyl group on the C3 carbon, then its activity will be enhanced and its duration action will be reduced. These kind of questions, you will definitely see at least 25 to 30 questions in the exam. And during the exam, during that high stress levels, you will not even get an idea about which option to select. So especially medicinal chemistry, start studying it at least 6 months ahead of time. Do not sit and do it at the last minute, because medicinal chemistry is also a score deciding topic, because most people fail at medicinal chemistry. If you fail at medicinal chemistry and if you do everything else really great, even though you did everything else really great, you are at 99% at everything else, but you are at 1% in medicinal chemistry, there are 0% chances that you will pass the test, 100% that you will fail the test. So medicine, pay really more attention on medicinal chemistry. About the pharmacophores, SARs, and basic acidic and basic functional groups and drug properties. The question that I was asked is, aspirin cannot be kept in a restroom, and they asked me the reason why, and the options will be too big. Like you will need at least 1 minute of your time to read each and every single option. So they will give you a mechanism why it should not be stored in a restroom. The answer for this question is, aspirin is acetyl salicylic acid, which is more prone to hydrolysis, so it cannot be kept in a restroom. So every one of us know that aspirin is acetyl salicylic acid, but during the exam in that high stress level, you cannot be able to answer those kind of questions even though you know them. So be very prepared. be very, very prepared with the topics which are very difficult to answer, like medicinal chemistry. And also, I forgot to tell you guys about the reference books for the previous slide that I discussed. Every single topic is covered in AFA, which is American Pharmacists Association FPGE Review Guide. This guide is available in United States only, and this guide has everything that is required. Every single topic is covered in this guide. But this is not really enough to pass the test. You have to go through the basic information that is given in AFA, which is APHA, and then you have to go through the information parallelly in CPR, which is Comprehensive Pharmacy Review, that everyone know a good idea about it. Medicinal chemistry is also there in AFA. I prepared both APHA and AFA for medicinal chemistry. And then it comes pharmacology and toxicology, which is the backbone for the scoring area in FPGE. To me, I was almost near 200. My score was near 200, and I was 98% confident enough in the area of pharmacology and toxicology. You need to follow Lippincott. So start reading Lippincott for pharmacology and toxicology. Page 1 to at the last page, you need to know every single line in Lippincott. You need to understand every single mechanism of action, every single adverse effect, and a specific points about the drug class. So Lippincott, I can divide, what I can say is I can divide this pharmacology into two areas. First is chapter 1 of Lippincott, and the second is the rest of the chapters in Lippincott. So first chapter in Lippincott is the basics of pharmacology. If you get almost 60 to 70 questions in pharmacology, out of those 20 to 25 questions will be covered on basic pharmacology. That one single chapter can lead to 20 questions in your actual examination, excuse me. So those 20 questions, they really concentrate on agonist, antagonist, inverse agonist, and partial agonist, and also EC50, Emax, intensity, potency, and drug concentration relationship graphs, and also therapeutic ranges like therapeutic concentrations, and those kinds of questions. Dependence and tolerance. These topics, when I'm talking to you or when I'm speaking with you, these sounds really easy, but in the actual exam they make those questions really tough enough and really tricky enough. That's where the actual secret lies. So you need to know the basic fundamentals really good enough to answer those questions. If you answer those questions correctly, there is high chances that your score gets boosted. That's what I heard, and that's my true practical experience too. As I told you before, I was 98% confident on pharmacology and toxicology, and I studied Lippincott for 4 to 5 times before I sit for the exam. Even now, if you wake me in the middle of the night and ask me about where that particular topic is, I can point it out in Lippincott. So that's how you have to prepare pharmacology and toxicology. Next, coming to pharmacognosy and dietary supplements, this is also an important topic as well when compared to pharmacology, because in the United States, as a pharmacist, you have to recommend many over-the-counter products for your patients. I would do more than 50 recommendations every single day. So you have to know purpose of the over-the-counter products or purpose of the dietary supplements, their intake doses, their daily requirements, and also their regular interactions with prescription drugs. Say, for instance, St. John's wort. St. John's wort is a very common OTC product that goes here, and it is used for depression, mild to moderate depression. So most of the patients, if they are feeling depressed, they will get St. John's wort. But as a pharmacist, I need to make sure that it is not interacting with any other prescription drug products that they are taking. St. John's wort is a cytochrome P450 inducer. So it can enhances the metabolism of many drugs such as warfarin, digoxin, simvastatin, cyclosporin, and many other drugs, and can enhances them as it is enhancing the metabolism. It will decreases their activity in the body. So you cannot suggest a patient who is on cyclosporin to take St. John's wort, because St. John's wort will not allow cyclosporin to do its job in the body. So that's where the importance lies. And also these days, because of the pandemic, garlic and ginger over the counter products became really famous. And also the first thing that every pharmacist gets is an alert from US Pharmacist magazines or Pharmacist USA magazines, is that do not give your ginger or garlic products to the patients who are on blood thinners, because there are 5 Gs which cannot be dispensed to a patient who are on blood thinners. Those 5 Gs are ginger, garlic, ginkgo biloba, glucosamide, and something else. So these products cannot be given to a patient on blood thinners. You need to make sure when you are dispensing a OTC product, you need to look through the patient profile and see if it's going to interact with any of the actual treatment prescription drugs that they are taking with. So if a patient is having hepatic dysfunction, I cannot give a black cohosh or kava to a patient, because it will enhances the liver toxicity. So especially in the exams, in these board exams, they will definitely ask you questions about daily normal requirements of some vitamins and minerals, and also the drug interactions, major drug interactions of the dietary products with the prescription drugs. And these topics are covered in both CPR and APHA, which is American Pharmacists Association FPGE guide. These two are enough for this topic. And then coming to pharmaceutics, biopharmaceutics, and pharmacokinetics, this this is my favorite area when I was a PharmD student. So pharmaceutics and biopharmaceutics, uh, you can refer through those 2 chapters in CPR second and third chapters. They cover everything that you need for the exam. And also it has information in AFA as well. When it comes to pharmaceutics and biopharmaceutics, they will mainly concentrate on colligative properties and different dosage forms, different excipients that we use, HLB values, and then surfactants, and those kind of all the pharmaceutical manufacturing things will be answered in will be asked in pharmaceutics and biopharmaceutics. And when it comes to pharmacokinetics, I I personally followed Brahmankar for this, and Brahmankar is a really good reference, is what I felt like. They will ask you calculations in pharmacokinetics. They'll ask you about compartment models, Tmax, Vmax, half-life calculations, uh, and then zero order kinetics, first order kinetics, those kind of questions will be asked. Brahmankar also should be studied from page 1 to the last page. Pharmacokinetics, biopharmaceutics, and biopharmaceutics and pharmaceuticals. So these 3 topics will be a not much score deciding, but you will get few calculations and few theoretical questions from those. So I consider them as mid-level topics. So you can cover these topics at the end if you're not really interested in those. But go through the minimum basics for those to get through the test. And then pharmacogenomics and genetics, we really don't get much information about these in CPR, but you get really good information in APHA, APHA. So in here, especially in the United States, they will start testing your enzyme levels before they prescribe you a specific drug. For instance, if the patient is showing anaphylactic reactions to a particular kinds of or particular class of drugs, then they will test HLB or HLA genes before they prescribe something like abacavir. Especially in my work life, they will test for HLB 5701 gene before they prescribe abacavir for the patient. So these kind of questions will be asked, but they are really rare. They won't concentrate much. But you should know the minimum basics or the minimum gene and the gene testing and the drug, why is it tested for and what kind of reaction is there. So if the patient is HLB 5701 positive, then they will not prescribe, then they will deny prescribing abacavir. So those kind of specific gene and drug relationship questions will be asked in the exam. Next, coming to sterile and non-sterile compounding.
Excuse me, Sai Priya.
Yeah.
Just we are running out of time.
So do you want me to fasten it?
Yes,
Sure,
because the
sure.
next speaker is waiting here, Professor Mohanta Garu.
Sure, sure.
So,
Sure. So next thing is social behavioral and administrative sciences. You won't get many materials or you won't get much information in India, but once after you move to United States, you will get this information from alpha and many other materials. So this is not really a thing that we can discuss right now, but this is a thing that you can also take a look after you are here in the States. And then clinical sciences, it is almost much related to pharmaceutical sciences, but it needs some clinical knowledge or clinical importance in there. So CPR will help you much better than anything else for the clinical sciences. And then TOEFL IBT. So once after you're done with your FPGE, TOEFL is the next thing that comes to you. So TOEFL is also a difficult step, is what I can say, because you need to get all these scores in one single attempt. And I passed my TOEFL in my third attempt, but there are people who took 4 attempts, 6 attempts, and 13 attempts to pass TOEFL. These requirements are really high, and I would encourage you to improve your communication skills so that TOEFL will be much easier for you. And then once after you clear these certifications, then you will be offered a certificate, FPGEC. With that certificate, you can apply for intern licenses for particular state boards and then start your internship there in a particular state and get through it. Once after you are done with your internship, you can apply for NAPLEX, which is National North American Pharmacist Licensure Exam. Once after you pass NAPLEX, you need to sit for a law exam called MPJE, Multi-State Pharmacy Jurisprudence Exam. So it will be for us, NAPLEX is a federal exam. So if you pass NAPLEX, it's for all the states. But to practice in a specific state, you need to have an MPJE, pass MPJE score in that specific state. I'm a pharmacist in Texas. I can only practice in Texas, but in nowhere else, because I just passed MPJE for Texas. So if you want to seek your licensure in a different state, you have to apply for a different state exam and pass that exam and move there. And that's a brief thing about board exams in the United States. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. If you have any questions, we can talk later since we are running out of time. And yeah, thank you so much.
thank you, Dr. Sai Priya. You have given a wonderful. This is how you just express your experience, and really, I hope that our students are get benefit from this presentation. I hope that the students are eagerly wait to ask or interact with you. I give some time for the students. So please, if you are having your doubt, clearly you ask your question and don't take much time. One or two questions you can ask. Definitely, I will arrange one more guest lecture with especially to discuss these things for you, especially for our PharmD students. So just you interact, the most important few questions can be asked to madam. You unmute yourself or raise your hand. I can unmute you. You can raise your hand. Thereby I can unmute you. If you are having any doubt, you can interact with her. Okay, I hope that they have understood well. And if they are having any doubts in future, they can contact you, Cyprian. Once again, I am thanking you. I know that how much you are busy and how much you are working there in the busy schedule. But you have accepted our invitation to interact with our student and to give your view. And this is a really important thing because no one can explain like that in step by step how they can move and how it will be and how they have to approach for each and every point. Thank you so much, Dr. Sai Priya. And we are expecting your continuous cooperation for our PharmD students to get much more registered pharmacists in USA in future.
Sure, absolutely. We can definitely do that.
Thank you, Sai.
Yeah, thank you.
So now we are having here Professor Guru Prasad Mohanta, sir. Sir, I am welcoming you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, madam. Good morning.
Thank you so much, sir, for your acceptance to interact with our student. So for this symposium, I am cordially welcoming you, sir. I would like to call Ms. Swapna, intern, Chalpati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences, to give a brief profile of Professor Guru Prasad Mohanta Garu.
A very good morning, sir. It's my privilege to introduce Professor
morning.
Guru Prasad Mohanta, sir. Sir is a retired professor and head of Department of Pharmacy, Annamalai University, Chidambaram, Tamil Nadu. In regard to educational background, Sir pursued M.Pharm followed by PhD in Pharmacy. Sir is a specialized in the area of pharmaceutical management, rational drug use, pharmacoeconomics, and drug delivery systems. Sir have around 35 years of teaching experience exclusively in the field of pharmacy. Sir guided many MSc, ME, MPhil, and PhD students in their research projects. Sir conducted and also attended around 50 national and international conferences, workshops, seminars, and symposia. I was shocked to see that Sir have around 170 papers published in various national and international journals and around 7 books published in the various journals. Really so heartful thanks, Sir, for accepting our invitation for this symposium, sir.
Sir, you can share your screen, sir. Yes, sir.
Please.
Yes, sir. I made you a co-host. Now you can try.
Okay. My screen is visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible. Please maximize it, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, friends. And today is very auspicious day for India. You know, today we call Navami Puja, 9th day Puja for this goddess Durga. And we wish everybody, we greet each other and wish the Lord, Goddess Durga will bless all of us in this auspicious day. Friends, my first thanks goes to Professor Sarmila, who is very kind to invite me for this symposium. And second is the intern who beautifully narrated my profile, and I really appreciate her. Friends, we are in the midst of this COVID-19, and COVID-19 has devastated not only India but the whole world. And in spite of all this, we have started living with COVID-19 and moving forward to see a better world tomorrow. Friends, what does it mean to us, this new normal? We have been talking about this new normal, but I'm sure many still we have a dilemma. What is this new normal? How does we define this new normal? The dictionary defines previously unfamiliar or a typical situation that has become standard. See what we see here, it has completely stopped our mobility. We have lockdown, we have shut down, and in some of the countries now re-lockdown, shutdown has started after the emergence of the second wave of COVID-19. We also define this new normal as a new way of living and going about our lives, works, interaction with the other peoples. See, we are so much afraid of our school, colleges are already shut down. And it is expected probably next month or next to next month, the institution may open for regular activities. So a new way of living. We are not visiting our friends. We are not visiting our relatives. And sometimes we are afraid of visiting our own home. If by chance someone is affected, someone is tested positive, and to what extent we have gone. Even we are afraid of joining the funeral of our very close people because he or she has died of corona. So altogether our lifestyle, our economic condition completely changed, and that is why we are talking that this is the new normal. And the timeline we have, all of us know this, that we see in the history before Christ and after Christ. BC, before Christ and after Christ. And the timeline what we use is the after Christ. Otherwise we call BC. And now this new timeline has come. Before Corona and after Corona. Before Corona, we have seen, and after Corona, we have not seen. It will take long time for us to see the situation after Corona. We are in the midst of the Corona. So a new normal, new way of living for us, and the new way of living, how it brings new opportunities for us, especially the pharmacy. students. See, the current status of the coronavirus pandemic, age of study, 218 countries are affected. 218 countries are affected. And 413 lakhs people with positive tested with coronavirus, novel coronavirus, and more than 11 lakhs people died over this time, and this is the global death figure. In India, more than 77 lakh people with confirmed coronavirus cases, and more than 1,17,000 people already dead. And good news that situation is slowly getting better and better. At least at this point of time in our country, while many European countries, they are facing the second wave of novel coronavirus. And we do not know whether we also get this second wave or we will not get. Hopefully, we should not get, because the vaccines are at our doorsteps. Vaccines are at, by another 6 months, definitely we will have a vaccine for about at least 1/3 of our population. If we look at the two professional group of pharmacists, the pharmacists who are working in retail pharmacy or in the community, and these are what is happening globally, not just restricted to India. So what this community pharmacy or community pharmacies have been doing, even at this pandemic, delivery of medicine to the patient, educating the patients on telehealth services. You will be happy to know that even in our country, the teleservices are started. Telehealth services are started. People can call them, talk to them, and can even get the prescription. Then for those chronic patients, chronically suffering from diabetes, hypertension, they are finding difficult even to go to the hospital, because the private clinics are almost stopped, and the hospitals, people are afraid of going there, or they themselves have started restricting the patient. And here our pharmacists are playing a major role, because they are offering whatever understanding they have, whatever knowledge they have, and restricting people not to go to the hospital. They don't discourage, but they say your medicines can be renewed, and they get this probably the renewal recommendation by directly talking to the physicians. And for minor ailments which can be treated with over the counter or non-prescription medicines, that they have been doing. And if you'll see here, the patient, for the patient, it is the first point of contact. So anything they feel, first they go to the neighborhood pharmacy and ask. And even for this corona, they are asking, I have these symptoms, what should I do? In spite of all the advertisements coming in the radio, in the television, in our mobile phone, that if you have fever, if you have the symptoms, go to the hospital or contact the helpline number, still people first trust our neighborhood pharmacist. Then clarifying the misconception. This is one of the biggest challenges not only the our country is facing. This misconception are prevailing throughout the world, and there are big problems because these are not facts, these are not truth, but being spreaded through different means. Then we'll see our another group of professional pharmacists who are working in the hospital, and the frontline corona warriors, one of the frontline corona warriors. And you will be happy to see the some of the government has put hospital pharmacists also on par with other health professionals like doctors who are coming directly in. See, doctors are most of the coming directly in contact with, but they all have the PPE, and many of these hospital pharmacists, they do not have the PPE, but still they are serving the people. And Delhi government is probably the first government who announced the compensation of 1 crore for those frontline workforce losing their life. And one of our pharmacy colleague, his wife has received this amount. So we get good opportunity to serve people. At the same time, what we see, we have a big risk involved in serving, and many of the pharmacist friends, they have lost their lives in different parts of this country. So what they have been doing, they are managing the shortage of drugs. And why shortage of drugs? See, the drug logistics is disturbed with arrival of coronavirus. The logistics are disturbed, and this disturbance started from manufacturing of the medicines, because many of the raw materials comes from China. And when the coronavirus emerged, COVID-19 started disturbing the regular activities. The pharmaceutical industries shut down in Wuhan cities and other cities of China. So that is one side. The other side, the mobility is also, the logistic is disturbed, and both of them has caused the shortage of medicine in some parts of the country, some health institutions, and the pharmacist was forefront in managing the drug shortage. The development of treatment protocol, This treatment protocol is so confusing. Today we have one treatment protocol. The next day we have a different protocol. Because why it is so confusing? The confusion is because it is a new virus, novel virus. We do not know about this virus, how it behaves, how it affects human, and that is why our protocol changes with the time. And the pharmacist will be in a position, especially the clinical pharmacist, to collect the latest information and place before the clinician or the authorities, which would help in development of treatment protocol. They participate in word rounds. They help in interpreting the laboratory results. Then next comes is we don't have the medicine, we don't have the vaccine. So what we see at this moment, the vaccine and the medicines, they are all in clinical trial. They are all in clinical trial. This is the first time US FDA, 2 days before, first time approved a drug for use in COVID-19. Till today, it was just a experimental drug. But still, there are a lot of confusion on that particular medicine, because one side the company claims it is very effective in reducing the mortality rate. On the other hand, a large trial conducted internationally showed, of course, it is only the preliminary result, shows that the drug is of little use in reducing the mortality. So when we have this drug trial, the hospital pharmacists are involved wherever this drug trial is going on, recruiting the participants. Then exploration of new drugs, whatever, these are all repurposed drug. None of them is truly a new drug. And they are all being explored. Medication management advice. Along with this, what is found is use of antibiotics has increased. Use of antibiotics have increased, and this is very important that we have the stewardship program, so that, because people, we don't understand the implication of using these antibiotics in COVID-19. This is an coronavirus. It is a virus. So our use of antibiotics is of little value. So we have two potential area to look into where we'll have the good opportunities. We have no drugs, no vaccines. So when there are no drugs, no vaccine, world has been suffering from this COVID-19. Whole world is trying, whether it is researcher, whether it is government, whether it is pharmaceutical industries. Everybody is thinking, when we'll have a drug, when we'll have a medicine which can be effectively used in the treatment of COVID-19. When we are talking of an effective medicine against COVID-19, if we start planning now to develop a medicine for COVID-19, it will take 10 years to come out. Minimum period of 10. So what people have started, based on our previous knowledge, some of the drugs which were found to be useful, found to be promising in the treatment of other viral infection, are repurposing. We are trying to see whether this can be useful, this can be effective against the novel coronavirus. So all these drug trials that are going on, they are all repurposed drugs. Since they are all new drugs brings new promises, at the same time new surprises also. And these surprises are adverse drug events. No vaccine, we are in fact the restless. The first time it all came to the news that by 15th August, India will have a vaccine for coronavirus. Though it was a disputed claim, but it becomes August 15th over, then again they say by October, by the October is also going to be over, and now they say at least by end of, and even that is also probably not possible. Yes, emergency use in some countries, they have approved the vaccine, including the Russia, and what the Russia claims is this is the first vaccine for COVID-19. But thing is, it is not tested completely. So new vaccine is coming. So when the vaccine is to be administered to large number of people, we require lot of people to be trained on vaccination. Then the supply of vaccines, the vaccine logistics, this is another big area. The cold chain is to be maintained, and the pharmacists have been doing about this cold chain all these days through at least the community pharmacy or the retail farms. But now we want this should be part of the public logistics. The vaccines are always treated as new drugs as far as our regulations are concerned. If we look at our regulation, a drug is called a new drug up to 4 years, while the vaccines are continue to be called as new drug even after 4 years, because there is always possibility of these adverse drug events, adverse events following immunization. So we have identified the two good areas, the potential areas. One is the clinical research, the other one is vaccine use. So these two are new areas. I don't say is a new areas, but a potential areas. And at this time, there are a lot of activities both in the clinical research and in the vaccine administration, because we are in a desperate need of a new drug. So what the clinical pharmacist can do in the clinical research, it can develop a protocol of the trial, it can develop the documentation for regulatory submission. So here, when we talk of regulatory submission, we divide this activity into two categories. One is before approval, one regulatory submission, and that is the regulatory submission we do is for seeking permission to do the clinical trial. And then once clinical trial is over, we find satisfactory result. Then what we do? We ask the government seeking permission, seeking approval for use of the drug. And even after we get these, we continue to develop data for submission of PSUR, periodic safety update reports, which is also mandatory for clinical trial, drug approval, new drug. We can also prepare, or the firms can also prepare patient information leaflet. It assists in recruitment of volunteers. And when we say recruitment of volunteers, the volunteers are to be recruited after explaining them regarding the study, and what we called is we recruit them with informed consent, that the monitoring of the clinical trials and monitoring of the clinical trials is basically required to assess the compliance. Monitoring of clinical trial is done to ensure the adherence of good clinical practice. Once the clinical trial is over, the results are to be published, and the pharmacist professionals, especially with PharmD qualification, are the most suitable person to interpret the result and taking effort how to publish the results. Once we publish the results, the drug is approved, we need to develop the promotional materials, how the drug should be used, and the pharmacists are, clinical pharmacists are most person doing this. So in clinical research, what sorts of competency, if we want to do these sorts of works, what sorts of competency is required? The regulatory understanding, and for that, I suggest all our student friends to look at the new regulation 2019, the regulation that's framed in 2019, new drugs and clinical trial rules. So regulatory understanding is very important. Then understanding of the good clinical practice and how to develop the documents, how to make the documentation. So the competency in these areas are very, very important in order to make a career in clinical research at this point of time, where the careers of clinical research is very, very lucrative. The other area is the pharmacovigilance. The other area is pharmacovigilance, because what we now use is new drugs and new vaccines. So new drugs, new vaccines may have adverse events, and these adverse events are not known to us because the drugs are new and the drugs have not been used for a long time. In the only probably the clinical trial is done, and even clinical trial might have also not completed all the 3 pages. So the new drugs and clinical trial rules specifies whoever manufactures the new drugs, whoever imports the new drug, means the organization responsible for manufacturing, responsible for importing, must have the pharmacovigilance system in place, and they should be submitting the periodic safety update report for 2 years at 6 monthly interval, and next 2 years on annual basis. There must have a mechanism for pharmacovigilance audit and inspection as a part of the quality system. So pharmacovigilance is another area where we have much more opportunities or avenues. So in order to work in the pharmacovigilance, and you will be happy that recently even the Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission has advertised for large number of people for recruitment as the technical associates in pharmacovigilance. The question is, industries are doing pharmacovigilance, the government is doing pharmacovigilance. So when we go for attending an interview, yes, I want to work on the area of pharmacovigilance. And if my employer asks me at the time of interview, what can you do? Yes, you are interested to work on pharmacovigilance, but what you can do? We should be able to tell clearly what we can do, what are the areas we have the competency, not that answer whatever you tell us, whatever duty assigned to me, I'll do that. That means when we talk of whatever duty assigned to me, I'll do that. That means I am not able to understand what are my competency areas. So I should be able to tell, yes, what you can do is I can do the causality analysis. I can do the signal identification. I can document the adverse drug reactions. I can do the data entry in the software. I can even do the communication. Communication is very, very important, and most of our problems in the society and interpersonal relationship is because of inappropriate communication. Friends, you know, many times you might have seen you are talking over telephone and suddenly other person cuts. Still you wanted to speak something, but other person has cut. Because why it happens? He thinks or she thinks that she has completed her job, so cuts the telephone. But you still wanted to speak, wanted to tell something. And that is why you might have seen sometimes in movies, in films, when in two Jawans, two soldiers are talking, and from both sides they call over, over. That means I have completed my talk. The other side also will talk over, over, then only telephone get disconnected. And so the communication is very, very important, and especially the communication in pharmacovigilance, because you are going to communicate regarding the adverse drug reactions, adverse drug events, and that can even frighten the people. So a very, very balanced communication is necessary. And second thing is the basic principle of communication that we say is KISS, KISS. Keep it short and simple. KISS is the basic principle of communication. So where we get the job opportunities for this pharmacovigilance? Health system, the hospitals, especially the tertiary care private hospitals, they are all going for NABH accreditation. And when they are going for NABH accreditation, one of the requirement is a clinical pharmacist must be available for medicine management. Now, why the hospitals are interested on this NABH accreditation? Because if accredited, they can get patient from outside the country and their insurance company will pay for it. And that is why many of our hospitals, tertiary care hospitals, are interested for this. Then we have in government, Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission is the nodal center at this moment, appoints a lot of the industries because mandatory pharmacovigilance activities. Many software industries also jumped into it, TCS, Accenture, and they have all come for this pharmacovigilance business. The international agency like World Health Organization, Management Science for Health, and Uppsala Monitoring Center, they too also recruit. And if you see, even at this moment, the World Health Organization key person looking after the pharmacovigilance or the safety monitoring is Dr. Santipal from India, who is also a pharmacy professional. We have not seen the post-COVID era. We are at this moment in the midst of post-COVID era, but hopefully the post-COVID era will be different. So what could be the possibilities? RAS for finding treatment, so first tracking of the approval of the medicine. And if we want to achieve the post-COVID era, we have the only weapon available at this moment, and the whole world is looking for this vast-scale vaccination. Friends, we have achieved polio-free status, and we have achieved smallpox spray glove. This is all. So similarly, in this case, if one country gets vaccinated, free from coronavirus, the world is not free from the threat of the coronavirus. one state in our country, no coronavirus infection, but that is not the solution, because people will be moving from one state to the other state. So even one person is affected, and the same person can spread the infection to others. So what we want is basically complete elimination, complete elimination. And that is the reason why we have gone is the, if you see the last celebration we had is World Pharmacist Day. And the World Pharmacist Day, that is the global, how pharmacists can work globally. That is what we are looking for. So there have been a lot of regulatory changes that are occurring, and these regulatory changes are occurring because a need for these changes has been found, and we must have the electronic way of reporting, because we cannot send the courier or post at this corona time. So the communication channel should be established by different ways, and it is projected the pharmacovigilance market will have a dynamic growth due to entry of new drug molecules and the vaccines as well. So this is pharmacists as vaccine providers. As of today, Indian pharmacists legally not permitted to give vaccines, but now the time has come. Now we are going to vaccinate 30 crore Indians within a short span, and we need large number of vaccinators. The vaccinators that we have been using over the years under universal immunization programs will not be adequate, and I am sure the government of India will now permit the pharmacist also as a vaccine providers. So FIP is already doing it, advocating, and even United States of America, the new guidelines issued on September 3 says all the earlier restriction that pharmacists cannot provide. Some of the states, though majority of the states allow this vaccination, some of the states do not. And this new guidelines, September 3rd guidelines, supersedes and says pharmacists can be the vaccine providers. So in addition to being a provider or administrator of the vaccines, we can also look at the vast logistics, that is beginning from manufacturing unit to the end use point, how we can maintain the cold chain. Pharmacists as counselors, this is another area. We have plenty of issues at this moment. The people have misconception, people have misunderstanding, and pharmacists are knowledgeable about the disease, about the disease causing agent, and the medication. And there are one area now, there are a lot of issues, immunity booster agents. Madam, just 10 minutes.
Okay, sir.
The pharmacists are the information providers, and we have the terminology like information, we have the terminology misinformation, and we have the terminology like disinformation. So everybody gives, starting from the Facebook to the other social media, every day we receive plenty of messages on coronavirus, COVID-19, and many of them, many of these message, many of these informations are either disinformation or misinformation. And so the true information is very difficult. And if we look at the Facebook itself says it has removed the hundreds of thousands of coronavirus posts. And see how these things are coming. And the misinformation. One of the misinformation said COVID-19 equates to death. If you see the death rate from the COVID-19 is much lower than the death rate of many of the infectious diseases. So here, see how information spreads. The trial volunteer died in Brazil. AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine trial is in progress in Brazil, and a volunteer died. What public thinks? Because truth is immediately not surfacing. The headlines only comes. The volunteer dies. As of now, what information is available? They say the particular person who died has not received the trial vaccine. We have the placebo controlled, and the placebo controlled, that arm only the individual who died belongs to. But the message spreads and people get frightened. So what we need is, we should bring pharmacovigilance closer to the health system. We should correct the high quality of data, and we need to be vigilant about the false information. And what we can do is, we can inform patient, we can explain the common man, we can explain the community members, and put them in right information. So our Prime Minister has already told, yes, lockdown and shutdown has gone, but coronavirus has not gone. The coronavirus is still among us. So the best way to protect ourselves is washing our hands frequently, wearing masks, and maintaining the social distance. So let us greet each other through our traditional way of greeting people, Namaste. Friends, every threat is an opportunity. Yes, we are under the threat of COVID-19, but this COVID-19 opportunity threat can be converted into opportunities, and the initiative has already started. Like every cloud has a silver lining, the COVID-19 too brought us a lot of opportunities. And you can see at least one, there is a big change in the pharmaceutical landscape of this country. Now, the country is thinking we should be Atmanirbhar self-reliant on medicine. No longer on we should depend on this China for the supply of the raw materials and the intermediates for our medicine production, so that we can achieve the medicine security. Thank you very much for all patience, invitation, and it's my pleasure to be with you all this morning, because I love to be with my students.
Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of Principal, sir, and the Chalpati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences, I'm thanking you very much for your wonderful presentation with many updated information for us, sir. Thank you so much, and you have spent your valuable time between the rituals on this auspicious day. Thank you so much. Always, we are taking you as a inspirer to interact with the young mind like a student and giving updated information. These things are keeping us and motivating us to be to do something in the pharmacy field, sir. Thank you so much. Students, if you are having any doubts, if you want to interact with sir, I'm giving few minutes of time. Please, you can interact. If you are having any doubts, please raise your hands. Then I can unmute you.
They are free to write an email to me, and there is an assured assurance that within 2 days they will get a reply.
Thank you, sir.
And
So
I have one more suggestion to these people, the young minds. When they are looking for career, look beyond a myopic view. The whole world is yours. Whole world is yours. Thank you, madam.
Thank you so much, sir. So in absence of your doubts, you can contact at any time to sir. I will give you the contact mail ID and all those things. And frequently you can see sir in our institution. Once again, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. You can, I can leave now, madam?
Yes, sir. You can leave now, sir.
How to go?
Good morning, Rajesh, sir. Sir, I have made you a co-host. Okay. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome you, sir. Good morning. And I would like to welcome you to our institution, Chalpati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. Thank you so much, sir, for your immediate acceptance. And even we don't have previous discussion or any contact, just I have contacted you through Facebook and immediately you have accepted. Thank you so much for your acceptance, sir. Students, now we are having our third session. Mr. Rajesh Talaparmat, Manager, Inpatient Medication Management Service, John Hopkins, Aramco Healthcare, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I'm welcoming, sir. I would like to call Swapna to give a brief introduction about sir. Swapna.
Yeah, ma'am. A very good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Let me introduce Rajesh Talampati, sir, M.Pharm LSSG. Sir is working as a manager, inpatient medication management services, pharmacy services department, John Hopkins Amco Healthcare, Dhahran, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Sir hail from Kerala, which is known as a God's own country. In regard to educational background, Sir pursued both B.Pharm and M.Pharm from Sri Ramakrishna Institute of Paramedical Sciences, and Sir achieved a green belt in Lean Six Sigma from Exemplar Global USA and ASHP certifications on medication safety. Sir, regarding the experience, Sir started his career as lecturer in pharmacy at JSS College of Pharmacy, Mysore, and after Sir is with the Pharmacy Service Department, Saudi Amco Medical Services Organization, currently known as John Hopkins Amco Healthcare. So he's working as a manager inpatient medication management services at John Hopkins Amco Healthcare and engaged with the different responsibilities including clinical, non-clinical, and administrative areas. Sir worked as decentralized pharmacist for various intensive care units and other general patient care areas. And Sir also worked as an operating room pharmacist at automatic drug dispensing units. And Sir served as a member for pharmacy quality improvement team. And Sir is a senior member in Pharmacy Advisory Council and many other committees. And Sir served as a pharmacist champion in unit-based patient safety program for intensive coronary care unit at John Hopkins Amco Healthcare. And Sir is actively involved in pharmacy services departments in continuing professional development program, provided a number of clinical teaching sessions with the organization and symposiums. Sir also invited as a speaker for many national and international conferences. Sir is an active member of European Society of Clinical Pharmacy, Federation of International Pharmacists, National Association of Healthcare Quality, and other professional organizations in India. Thank you, sir. Really, we are fortunate to have a person like you as a speaker to this program.
Thank you so much. I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, sir.
That's great. Okay. Thank you so much for your kind introduction and the invitation to your organization for this wonderful morning. And as introducer mentioned, I started my career as a lecturer in pharmacy. Basically, I'm not a clinical a person with a lot of clinical background. I'm a master's degree in pharmaceutical chemistry, actually. I just want to mention that, it's all about your interest, how you want to develop in your career. It doesn't mean that you need to have a PharmD or a pharmacy practice master's, to develop clinically. It's all about your interest. Pharmacy profession we have been witnessing tremendous changes in the pharmacy profession for the last 2 to 3 decades. It's changes upside down now. That means if you look at the functionalities of the pharmacists all over the big hospitals now, rarely see someone more engaged in dispensing practices, in purchasing, in getting logistics, etc., etc. So these are out of our hands now. Even dispensing, it's gone. If you look at the hospitals now, you'll see a lot of new technologies have originated, especially since 1991. There was an Institute of Medicine report regarding the medication errors, which talked about the number of deaths happening in the hospital, and majority of them were related to the medication errors. And it was surprising numbers, actually. It was like more than 7,000 deaths happening annually only in US healthcare sector. Majority of them related to the medication errors. Actually, when that report, the first Institute of Medicine report published, actually the public was really shocked. They thought that the medication, the hospital environment is much safer than they expected, but that was not the fact. And then there was a second Institute of Medicine report published in soon after the first one, which talk about the different modalities they need to achieve. I mean, they need to take care, which includes implementation of newer technologies. So since that day, most of the healthcare organizations in the world, they've been talking about implementing more technologies in hospital settings. So now if you go to the hospitals now, you rarely find someone dispensing the medication. I'm talking about the big healthcare systems. It's been taken over by the robotics. It's been taken over by the automated drug dispensing systems. It's been taken over by the artificial intelligence. So things have changed. So now at this point of time, you really need to think what exactly you want to become actually. You know, the traditional dispensing part is already gone. So now, related to this topic, I don't have any financial implications or nothing to disclose about it. In the coming few slides, you're going to see, we'll discuss about the medication therapy management, MTM. We'll talk about some of the specialized clinical pharmacy practice services the hospitals are providing nowadays, and what are the barriers in implementing such new services in hospital culture. So these are the few things we are going to discuss in the next coming few slides. Medication therapy management, MTM. This is a very commonly used term all over the profession nowadays. So this is basically a distinctive service or a group of services that optimize therapeutic outcomes for the individual patients. Medication therapy management services are independent but can occur in conjunction with the provision of medication product. So basically what's going to happen or what's happening nowadays is that your focus as a pharmacist is totally changed now. We have changed our focus from the brand names, from the products to the patients. We are focusing more on the bedside rather than the pharmaceutical products. And the purpose is the safety of the patients, in fact. So we are looking for a patient-centered care to the patient, the patient-centered pharmacy practice or the medication therapy management, which can be really benefited for our patient community. So you can do it as an independent services, or you can coordinate along with your existing services in the hospitals. So basically, you're not looking at the product or brands, you just look at the patients and how we can individualize and safely deliver the therapy to the patient. It's a broad range of professional activities and responsibilities within our pharmacist role or the qualified pharmacist or healthcare provider scope of practice. So there are a number of terms you might come across when we talk about the medication therapy management. Some of them are like comprehensive medication management, comprehensive medication review, disease management. That means the comprehensive medication review means you look at the medication profile of the patient and review it completely and come up with your suggestions. And the disease management is like you focus on certain diseases. For example, you focus on, for example, the patient's post-renal transplantation or the patients are with the MI, you focus on the patient with the heart failure, etc., or the stroke, etc. So basically, you focus on certain disease conditions only. And the targeted medication review is that where you make a focus on certain class of medications. For example, you focus on the immunosuppressants. You extract the list of patients who is already on immunosuppressants, and you see those patients and remove those patients actually. So that's what we call it as targeted medication review. And finally, the medication counseling, where you coach the patient about the appropriate use of medications. You teach the patient about the appropriate use of certain devices, for example, the spacer, inhalers, etc., the medical devices, etc. So basically, the term medication therapy management, it involves all these like 5 components. It involves a comprehensive medication management. It involves the comprehensive medication review. You're going to review the medications. Certain times you just focus on certain diseases based on the patient condition, or you target some of the medications or class of medications, and you finally counsel the patient and document it. So these are the few elements in medication therapy management. Why the medication therapy is MTM is so important. So we all knew that there are so many of our patients ending up with the medication related problems. What we call it as a drug-induced diseases. Could be drug-induced renal failures, it's common, drug-induced hepatic failures, other diseases, etc. So medication-related problems are nowadays more common. One of the reasons is that some of the medications are mismanaged, and it's become a massive public health issue nowadays. And it's been estimated that approximately 1.5 million preventable adverse events occurs each year only in the US market. So preventable adverse events, that means it's nothing but it's medication errors. And those medication errors cost approximately 177 billion US dollars only in the US market. I think we have better way to use this money rather than spending on the medication errors. So medication errors is something really we need to look at, especially in the Indian context. We don't have a registry of medication errors. No one look at the medication errors. Most of the hospitals they don't have a system to look at the medication errors. They don't have a system to manage how to manage the medication errors once it is reported. So basically, the medication errors, what you see, or the reported events, what you see is just like a tip of the iceberg. I would clearly say that it's just like a tip of the iceberg. So this data is based on an article published in 1995. So why I have taken this data is because, and this report is from US actually. This was published in Journal of American Medical Association. And those days, exactly, there was not many technologies used in medication management, including the electronic health records or CPOE, the computerized provider order entry. There was no automation, there was no artificial intelligence. So basically, most of those hospitals, they used to follow the traditional paper-based ordering process. So I think that's most likely what we have currently in India. So this is the reason why I have taken this data from those publications. And whenever you look at the articles, you rarely find a published document, a published article about the medication errors from the Indian hospitals, because our culturally we try to hide the medication errors. But basically, most of the hospitals outside India, especially in the Western world, they publish the medication errors. They speak to the families, and they feel that this is one way they can learn many things from the reported events. So if you look at this data, there are four major steps or points where the medication errors are happening. One is at the time of ordering and prescribing, medication administration, transcription, and dispensing. So if you look at the numbers or in percentages, 56% of the medication errors are happening at the time of ordering and prescribing. That's from the clinicians. 34% of the medication errors are happening at the time of administration. That's from the nursing. So altogether, 90% of the medication errors are happening outside the pharmacy's door. Isn't it really shocking? When we talk about the medication error, we always perceive that medication errors are happening only in the pharmacy. That's not the fact. That's not the truth. Only 10% of the medication errors, that's 6% of the errors comes from the transcription errors, as well as approximately 4% comes as a dispensing errors from the pharmacy law. So it's only 10%. 90% of the medication errors are happening at the nursing stations at the time of medication ordering, in the clinics, in the hospital wards. So this is one of the reasons why we always say that there should be a presence of a clinical pharmacist in nursing areas for the direct patient care. If you look at the accreditation process now, especially if you have some experience with the accreditation bodies like Joint Commission, International JCIA, they mandate that every hospital, each and every prescriptions, each and every inpatient medication orders should be reviewed by a pharmacist. This is a must. You will not be able to administer any medication without being reviewed by a pharmacist. This is a baseline. So there are few exceptions where the medication can be administered without a pharmacist review. Those are like some emergency situation. For example, if you have a cord blue running, in emergency, somebody is crashing and the physician is administering the medication directly to the patient, or in situations like in procedural areas, like for example, the cardiac cath or surgical areas in surgeries. So these are the only situations where someone receives the medication without a pharmacist review. So where we can provide the medication therapy management, MTM, you can provide it anywhere actually, wherever you are dealing with the medications and patients. It could be a hospital, it could be a clinic, or even in the pharmacies, in the community pharmacy level. But ultimately, the goal of all the pharmacies providing medication therapies management is to make sure that the medication is right for the patient, and that's correlating with the conditions of the patients actually. And finally, we should have the best possible outcome with that particular therapy. So doesn't matter wherever you provide. It could be a hospital, it could be at the bedside, it could be in a critical care area, or in a clinic, or in a community level. But ultimately, our ultimate target is that you deliver a best possible outcome to the patient. So now the question comes: who can get benefit out of this MTM? Anyone using the medication can be benefited out of the medication therapy management programs. It may not be a prescription medication, including non-prescription medication, over-the-counter medication, herbals. Exactly, the herbals need to be, you need to pay special attention to the herbals in the hospitals and community pharmacies, because especially culturally, we say that herbals are free from any side effects. Do you think this is a fact? It's not the fact. Herbals have side effects, and it's been actually the molecules are in a crude form. That's all the difference. Actually, the people from the Ayurveda, they may not agree with me, but yes, it has side effects, and more than side effect, it has got a lot of drug interactions with the medications, other medications. And also, you need to pay attention on the dietary supplements. And who are the people? The patients who take several medications. There's a possibility of polypharmacy, especially those patients who's been taking more than 5 medication or 7 medication. There's a good chance of polypharmacy, drug interactions, okay, drug-feed interactions, etc. And the patients with the multiple comorbid conditions or the several health conditions, and any patients who got a lot of questions about their problems and medications can be beneficial out of this program. And the patients who are taking medication that require close monitoring, for example, the typical example is that like drugs like warfarin, drugs like aminoglycoside antibiotics, drugs like phenytoin, drugs like vancomycin, etc. So it needs close monitoring. And the patient who's been hospitalized. And the last thing is that the patients who takes the medication or obtain medication from more than one pharmacy. On top of this, I would say that there is something called as the physician shopping. That means traditionally our system, we don't have a proper family medicine system back home in India. So we try to approach the general practitioners or GPs. So the issue here is patients may not be approaching the same GPs every time. So they go to the first GP and they may not feel good. So then probably after a week or 1 week, 2 weeks, they might approach a second GP or another hospital, third hospital, fourth hospital. So from all these clinics and hospitals, they obtain prescriptions and they go to pharmacies and they obtain the medications. Now, what is the problem here? There will be a lot of therapeutic duplications, drug interactions. So the root cause of all these issues is that we don't have an electronic tracking system here, or what we call it as a electronic healthcare system here. So if we have a system which we can track electronically, then if we go to the XYZ pharmacies or any clinics, we can obtain the medication profile easily in a one click of time. So we don't have that system right now in India. So we call it as a physician shopping. They go to 1, 2, 3, and 4th physician and get a prescription, and probably they might take all those medications together. So that's really dangerous. So all these patients can be benefited from medication therapy management. So only thing what you need to do is that you need to ask the patient to bring all the medication what they have at home. Ask them to bring the medication, speak to them, and ask them what are the medication you're currently taking, segregate the medication and find out what exactly they are on. So you can see a lot of duplications and interactions over there. So what are the scope of medication therapy management services? So basically, you perform a thorough assessment on the patient's health status on arrival. So you need to get all the data about the patients, including the patient's age and body weight. If there is a recent lab, you need to acquire those labs. And the one thing you need to immediately do whenever you have the labs, make sure that you have the serum creatinine ordered, calculate the serum creatinine clearance. Do not look at the serum creatinine alone. You need to look at the serum creatinine clearance. Actually, that will give you an idea about the patient's renal status. Formulating the medication treatment plan. So compile all the medication and just formulate a treatment plan for the patient. Selecting, initiating, modifying, or administering the medication therapy. So review the treatment plan and select the appropriate medications, and you formulate a proper plan for the patient. Monitoring and evaluating the patient response to the therapy, including the safety and effectiveness of those medications, and performing a comprehensive medication review to identify, resolve, and prevent the medication-related problems, including the adverse drug events. And also, documentation is very important, documenting the care delivered and communicating essential information to the patients and other primary care providers. If you don't document, that means that you haven't done that. So documentation is very important. Providing verbal education to the training to the patients, or sometimes even the caregivers, immediate caregivers, or to the families about the medications and certain devices. Providing information, support services, and resources designed to enhance the patient adherence with this medication or therapeutic regimen. So when you provide the information, you can use either verbal communication, you can give the flyers or the pamphlets, or you can nowadays, there are so many hospitals which use the videos, which you can use an iPad or any of the tablets or even the TV for communicating with the patients. Coordinating, integrating medication therapy management services within the broader healthcare management services being provided to the patient. So basically, you'll be coordinating any issues with the patient as well as with the healthcare providers also. So the core elements of any medication, any proper medication therapy management program is MTM program is that you'll have a medication therapy review. You'll have to have a personalized medication record. Basically, you need to create a medication profile for the patient. If you have an electronic system, that's the best one. Medication-related action plan. Create an action plan, how you're going to start and what's the end, or what's your target and what's your action plan. You need to come up with an intervention, as well as if there is a requirement, you need to go for a referral. And finally, documentation and follow-up. So in a nutshell, what's going to happen with the medication therapy management as a whole thing is that there are two parts. One is the medication therapy review, as well as the intervention or the referral part. So basically, you review all the medication and get the patient information. Review the medication for the indications, effectiveness, safety, and adherence. You create a list of medication, what we call it as a medication profile, and finally, identify the problems, and then you need to prioritize the problems. Actually, what problem you need to address first. Minor things, probably you can do it later, but there could be certain things which we need to address it fast. For example, a serious drug-drug interaction, you might need to immediately address it. So prioritize it, what exactly you are going to do, and create an action plan for the patient. So coming to the intervention or referral part of that, so you might need to refer this patient back to a physician or a specialist or any other specialist pharmacist. For example, you could be having a pharmacist who is an expert in for example, anticoagulation or in pharmacokinetics, etc., or behavioral health or psychiatry. So you might need to go for a further referral, either a physician or an expert pharmacist, or sometimes you might need to do a referral to other, what we call it as a nurse clinicians, psychiatrist, social worker, etc. So there are certain situations you might need to go for such referrals. You need to communicate intervention directly with the patients. So when we say the communication, actually, I'm sure that Dr. Mahanta mentioned about the communication in the previous presentation. Communication is very important here. So it's really interesting that pharmacists or the clinical pharmacists should have really good communication skills, actually. So ideally, you should have two kinds of communication skills. Number one is the communicating in layman's language. So you're going to talk to the patient. So you cannot use those complicated medical terms to the patient. So they need to understand what you're talking about. So basically, you need to know how to communicate in a layman's language, in a language where the patient can understand. At the same time, on the other side is that you should use a real professional way of communication with your fellow healthcare professionals to communicate. So this is like two different extremes. But again, whenever I get a student or a resident or internee from the universities for training purpose or a new hire, I always focus on the communication part actually. And I always say that if you're a good communicator, 80% of your issues are resolved actually. And creating interventions in either in collaboration with our fellow professionals, or even sometimes you can take the decisions independently. So intervention is very important. And finally, you implement the plan. Create a plan and implement it. And finally, you create what is your plan is a personalized medication record, or what we call it as a medication profile, either an outpatient profile or an inpatient profile. Medication related action plan, what you're going to do, what are the modification you need to make it on those profiles. And finally, the documentation and the follow-up. Sometimes you need to really follow up very frequently. So this is what exactly happening in any of the medication therapy management, the core elements in medication therapy management services in any hospitals. So different hospitals might be using different terminologies, different systems. Nowadays, most of the hospitals are using the electronic system for documentation. So it doesn't matter whatever the system you are using, but basically these are the core actions you need to do on the medication therapy management. So coming back to the medication therapy management, we will just discuss about some of the specialized services you can provide in hospitals, specifically in the hospital, in inpatient settings, etc. Because I'm putting most of this inpatient things because my experience all over the career is in the inpatient areas. Medication reconciliation. I'm sure that medication reconciliation is one of the hot topic we always discussing in any of the venues in for the pharmacy practice or the clinical pharmacy services. So why we have to have a medication reconciliation? Again, I'm coming back to the data from the hospitals or hospitals in the US or the Western countries, because unfortunately, you rarely find the data from Indian hospitals, what we are doing in terms of quality, the quality of care, specifically in terms of pharmacy practices and the medication errors. So many of the hospitals, they say that millions of people, they take multiple medication. We talk about the polypharmacy, in fact, and they end up with the chronic conditions, in fact. And the cost of the poor medication management surrounding the hospital admission and the discharge, that will be translated into billions of dollars, in fact. This is a statement from ASHP. So patient admission to the hospital and the discharge, it's a very, very critical time, in fact. And that's a time which is really important for in terms of pharmacy, clinical pharmacy services for us. We already mentioned about the drug-related errors, and most of these kind of errors are happening in the transition of care. The transition of care means that's a different transition. That means then there are different areas where transition of care happening, which is number one is the discharge, transfers, and the admission. So admission, transfers, and discharge, these are the most important transition of care. That means patient get admitted in the emergency room, he is sick, he might go to an intensive care unit. The patient become better, probably in a couple of days, transferred to a step down or a normal nursing area. So this is what we call it as transition of care. So around 60% of the medication errors occurs during the patient admission, discharge, or transfer of care. This is very important. 60% of the medication errors are contributed by either admissions or discharges or transfer of care. And the most important thing is that it's been estimated that at least one medication error occurs each day for an average hospitalized patient. This is too much. Minimum is one medication error per patient. But again, if you have a habit of going for the clinical rounds with the multidisciplinary team, you might end up with a lot of clinical interventions. So all those clinical interventions you are doing during your clinical rounds, these are all falling under the category of what we call it as a near miss. So near miss is nothing but an event which could happen or which could happen, which could reach to the patient, but it was prevented before reaching to the patient. So all the medication related near misses, all the medication related intervention, clinical interventions will fall under the category of near misses. You are preventing a lot of errors by doing a clinical round. So what are the aspects of medication reconciliation, a proper medication reconciliation? What are the steps, or what are the stages, or what are the areas where you can do a medication reconciliation process? So as we mentioned earlier, admissions, transfers, post-operatively, discharge, and transferring between the facilities. So these are the 4 or 5 different stages where medication reconciliation is must. So basically, at the time of admission, what's happening with the medication reconciliation is that you're going to collect data from the patient, you interview the patient or the family, or probably you might ask the patient to bring the medication, whatever the patient is taking, bring it to the hospital during the admission. That may not be practical or every time, especially if there is an emergency admissions. But collect the data, interview the patient, interview the family, collect the data, collect what are the patient medication, outpatient medication or the medications at the ambulatory setting. And when you collect the data, the most important thing is that we forget certain aspect, in fact. Number one, over-the-counter medication. Sometimes you feel that these medications are not important, but collect everything, including the over-the-counter medications, supplements, herbal supplements, and any other supplements the patient is taking, and nutritional products, etc. So whatever the patient is taking, just collect it and compile a list, proper list. And now the patient is admitted. For example, the patient is admitted for the management of acute coronary syndrome, ACS. Now, any patient admitted with acute coronary syndrome, this is a typical example actually. So we will have a list of medications actually for any hospital what need to be started. So typically, any of the hospitals, we just start with number one is the pain management. We will manage the pain. So what you're going to do for the pain management for ACS is that you start with the nitro, you might give some morphine. So these are a very typical management for the pain. And other medication, which includes an immediate dose of aspirin, probably like 300 milligram, chewable one. And then we'll go for a clopidogrel. Sorry. If the patient is going for an immediate cardiac catheterization or the clinical intervention, cardiac intervention, you might go up to 600 milligram of clopidogrel. Or if you are planning for after 6 hours, the procedure is planned for after 6 hours, you might just end up with giving 300 milligram of clopidogrel only. Then other medications like ACE, ARBs, nitro, etc. So these are the very common medications. So now you have a list of medication patient is supposed to take during his admission or her admission. So what you're going to do with the admission reconciliation is that you compare the outpatient medication, the medication which the patient was taking in ambulatory setting at home against the new list of medication, okay, and incorporate all those medications, the outpatient medication to the inpatient one, compare it, and remove whatever which is unnecessary medications, and look at the therapeutic duplications, look for the drug-drug interactions, look for all therapies which is not relevant to the patient. I mean, you might see some supplement, you can just stop it. Probably patient can resume it later after the discharge. Just continue only the required medication. So minimize the number of medication so that you can minimize the number of medication-related problems. Now, other area where you can do the reconciliation is the transfers. When the patient is transferring from, say, for example, from a critical care area to the normal ward. So we can see that critical care areas are already with the cardiac monitoring. So there could be a lot of medication which patient might be using there, especially which require a continuous cardiac monitoring. Right, so patient need a continuous monitoring of those medications and cardiac monitoring. So when this kind of patients transfer from the critical care area to the normal areas, you might need to stop a lot of medication, resume some of the medication which is you held it at the time of critical care transfer. So this is another time where you need to do a complete reconciliation process. And the third one is post-operatively. After the surgery, most probably you're going to hold all the medication, then probably you might give like 1 or 2 medication to control the hypertension on the day before the surgery. So when the patient come back after surgery, you might reconcile all the medication, then put it back, whichever is necessary. Again, maybe patient may not be able to take all the medications immediately, so you might hold it for some time or resume it later time. So this is again another step where you can do the post-op reconciliation. Another important time is the discharge. Again, as we mentioned about the admission reconciliation, another one is the discharge reconciliation. So we follow the same steps, that you have a compared list of current inpatient medication, the updated inpatient list of medication, inpatient profile, that you're going to compare with the old medication where the patient was taking before at home. And finally, you come up with a finalized list of discharge medication, and you prepare those medication and explain to the patient, okay, these are the medication you're going to take, and these are the medication you're going to stop, or these are the medication you're going to hold it for a certain period of time or resume it later. Discharge reconciliation is another important step. The most important steps are admissions as well as transfers as well as discharge. And also you can do the similar process when you are transferring the patient to a different facility. That means when your hospital not be having the facility for certain procedures, so you might transfer the patient to other hospitals. So when you transfer between the facilities, between different hospitals, you might need to do the medication reconciliation, and you need to send a finalized list of medication to the other care providers along with the transfer. So other services, for example, clinical pharmacokinetic services also, it's very common in the hospitals nowadays. So basically, we are providing services, the pharmacokinetic principles to determine the dosage regimens of specific drugs for specific patients to maximize the pharmacotherapeutic effects and minimize the toxic effects. So basically, you closely monitor the pharmacokinetic aspects of the medication therapy individually. So in most of the hospitals, including ours, we receive the pharmacokinetic consultant, and that means when they start certain medications, we automatically receive a consultation request from the physician, and we attend those patients. For the typical example is that, for example, drugs like phenytoin, drugs like vancomycin, drugs like aminoglycoside, antibiotics, digoxin, etc. So drugs with the narrow therapeutic index need to be closely monitored, and we need to have a frequent kinetic monitoring for such patients. So basically, you are going to look at the details of the patients, including the renal functions and all aspects, the metabolism, and you come up with a specific plan with a specific medication. So it's a kind of individualizing the therapy. So in detail, what you can see here is it's a monitoring. It's essential for achieving the positive outcomes for the patients across for the continuity of care and in all practice settings and health systems. This is one of the focus areas where pharmacists do a lot of works in the hospitals. So basically, as a consultant in clinical pharmacokinetics, so what are the responsibility for the clinical pharmacist? Basically, as I mentioned earlier, we just receive a consultation request from the physicians. Then you look closely into the patient. Actually, you review the patient's the current medication, the problem list, what are the issues related to the patient, how is the lab, specifically how is the renal function and the hepatic function for the patient. And basically, you need to design a special program for that, individualized program for that patient, depending on what request you got. For example, you got a request for to start vancomycin for a patient with, say, for example, endocarditis. So what are the starting dose you're going to make? How frequent you're going to give the dose? How frequent you're going to monitor? Okay, so these are the things which is independently done by the pharmacist. So basically, from the physician side, he just put an order to say that we're going to start a patient newly on the vancomycin, and you take care of it. So from that point, the clinical pharmacist will take care of the whole process. You calculate the doses, how much the dose required for the patient, how frequent you want to give. It's based on the renal function. And again, you need to clearly know the renal function of the patient. You need to calculate the creatinine clearance for those patients. And then once you finalize the dose and frequency, then you need to look at the monitoring parameters and schedule it. The lab request, you need to do it actually. You need to schedule the medications as well as the lab request. So when you need to do the TREV Sometimes you need to do the trough and peak for the medications. How frequent you need to monitor, how frequent you need to do the reassessment of the patient. Usually for us, we do every day. Every day we look at the patients actually. And then we evaluate the patient. That's what I said, evaluate the patient on day-to-day basis, and then finally document it, communicate it with your fellow professionals. Communication is very important. You need to document the patient file. Along with the physicians as well as the nurses and other clinical practitioners. That's very important. Once again, if you're not communicating, if you're not documenting, you haven't done anything for the patient. That's how it is. The other area of focus you can work on is anticoagulation stewardship programs. Many of the hospitals, they have it already. Even the hospital which I'm working, we got a anticoagulation clinic independently run by the pharmacist, clinical pharmacist, who is already certified in the anticoagulation. So we've been running almost like 15 years now. Basically, this is the pharmacist managed anticoagulation. It's been proven that it leads to reduced healthcare expenditure while improving the therapeutic outcomes compared with other usual medical care. So it's a proven scenario. Even we have conducted the studies actually pre and post. We evaluated the studies and how the INR values, is it normal or within the limit pre and post implementation of this program. So currently, all the warfarin is managed by a clinical pharmacist now. So we have a specialized clinic actually, and the patient get appointment. We schedule the patient for the appointment. We do a point of care INR testing in the clinic itself. We got a small device to do that. And then we reassess and readjust the rows of warfarin if required. So inpatient anticoagulation also can be done. It's actually, so in most of the situations, the anticoagulation is started in the inpatient areas, and then it will be followed by the outpatient clinics or the ambulatory settings. So even the inpatient anticoagulation is managed by a clinical pharmacist. So so basically you review the patients, and then you are the one to order for the daily INR. Based on the INR and the clinical condition, that's indication for the anticoagulation, you decide what dose need to be done for that particular day. So most of the 90 or 99% of situations, we do the warfarin dosing on day-to-day basis. So all over the hospital, even the other hospitals, most of the reputed hospitals, they do the anticoagulation through the clinical pharmacy services only. So ultimately, the purpose is to not to compromise the patient safety, because these are the really high-alert medication and medication with a narrow therapeutic index. And if skips through our hands, it could really end up with disasters, especially the massive bleeding. Another area is the area of behavioral health. This is another interesting area where some of the clinical pharmacists work, in fact, actually. Some of the hospitals, they have clinics operated by the clinical pharmacists. So what we do is, why we have to run such a kind of program is that approximately 1 in 4 patients, again, when I talk about the data, I always pick up the data from the Western world, because as we mentioned earlier, you rarely find the data in Indian context. So from the UK, it's been told that 1 in 4, that's 25% of the population, will experience a mental health problem, especially this year, which could be just like a generalized anxiety or a depression or a bipolar, what we call it as a post-traumatic stress disorders, etc. So 1 in 4 patients, 1 in 4 population, actually it's not patient, in fact, 1 in 4, that's a 25% of the population, UK population will experience some kind of behavioral health issues. And especially now with the COVID, separation, isolation, anxiety, that is really getting really bad. So we have a lot of opportunities in behavioral health. So what is very special to the behavioral health area? There are a couple of issues here, as we mentioned earlier. Number one is that issues related to the medication compliance. It's been told that approximately 50% of the patients will stop medication prematurely. That means without even informing the clinician. So they just stop the medication themselves. So compliance, medication compliance is one big issue in psychiatric medicine or behavioral health. And that's a place where pharmacists can play a vital role. The clinical pharmacists can play a vital role in the hospitals. So you can have a clinic run by the pharmacist. Routinely, you can look at the patients and the medication review, interview the patients, look at the patients, and ask the patient how frequent they are taking the medication and document it. And the second issue is that there are a lot of medication which produces adverse drug events, psychiatric medication, which includes the drugs with a narrow therapeutic index, including the lithium. So you need to monitor those medications very closely. So the purpose is like to reduce adverse events, you minimize avoidable harm or unplanned admissions to the hospital. So non-compliance will lead to the unplanned patient admission to the hospital. So we mentioned about the adherence to the medication therapy already. So approximately 50% of the patients in psychiatric medicine, in behavioral health, stop medications prematurely. So patient counseling, education, proper education, either individually or like sometimes you can even arrange the patients as a group. Educational sessions are very important, and the documentation. And sometimes on top of these activities within the hospitals, we conduct a lot of community reach programs. For example, programs about the drug abuse programs in schools and colleges, uh, drug abuse preventions in some of the certain companies, etc. Health and wellness program in certain companies or the corporate sector. So all these activities, smoking cessation is another area where you can focus. So behavioral health pharmacists will be involved in a lot of activities, day-to-day activities, including the patient counseling, the monitoring, education, research, etc. on day-to-day life. Parental nutrition service is another area where some of the pharmacists find really interesting. Nowadays, the hospitals have the certified, board certified pharmacist on parental nutrition services nowadays. Traditionally, parental nutrition, like for example, total parental, we used to call it as a total parental nutrition, TPNs before. Parental nutritions were done by either by physicians or by nurses himself, or later it was taken by the nutritionist or what we call it as dietitians. Now it's been taken over by the clinical pharmacist who's been certified in managing parental nutrition services as been certified pharmacist. So what's going to happen again, like what we mentioned about other consultation services, this is another consultation services which a physician makes. So they request for a consultation for the total parental nutrition. So once we receive total request for the consultation services, again, you have to review the patient case by case. So when you review these patients, you need to look at actual clinical picture of the patient. You need to really deep into that because parental nutrition services, it's very complicated. It needs a lot of efforts. It needs a lot of knowledge, experience. And the parental nutrition bag, what you're going to make from the pharmacy is like a cocktail of like 30 or 40 medications, including high alert medication. So if something goes wrong, it can really end up with disasters, in fact. So once we have this request for the consultation from the physicians, the clinical pharmacist will take over the patient and then look deeply into the patient's status, clinical status. Why the patient has been started on the parental nutrition? What is the patient requirement, in fact? Requirement based on the indication. So the question is, how much of the total caloric requirement is required for the patient? So what is the total? You need to sit and calculate the total caloric requirement, say like 1,800 calorie per day, or 1,000 or 2,000, 2,200, depends on the patient clinical status. So you need to sit and calculate with the various calculators, find out what is the total caloric requirement required for that patient. Then you need to divide this total calorie from different sources. How much, what percentage should come from carbohydrate? What percentage should originate from lipids? What percentage should originate from the proteins, amino acids? So you divide this total caloric requirement into three: from the carbohydrate, from the lipids, and from the proteins. On top of that, you need to calculate the total fluid requirement for the patients. Again, you need to know how much fluid is required for that patient for the next 24 hours. And when you calculate the fluid, You need to know what are the medication the patient is currently on, what are the IV medications, and how much of total fluid is going inside the patient, what is the intake, total intake, including those coming from the medications. So if you have a bag of a medication which is like 100 ml, that need to be calculated as an intake. Then other areas, like you need to know what kind of IV access patient got. Either patient got a central line access or patient got just a peripheral line access. This is very important because, and when you formulate a total parenteral nutrition, because the concentration for the concentration for the central axis as well as the peripheral axis both are totally different. You can go for a higher concentration with the central axis. You can go for higher concentration of electrolytes with the central axis, but for the peripheral axis you have a lot of limitations actually. So these are the things you need to consider before while you are reviewing the patients for the total parenteral nutrition services. Then on day-to-day basis, you need to review the patient, and daily basis you need to customize the patient for the total parenteral nutrition services. And again, comes to the hot topic, which is the antibiotic stewardship programs, where we have a lot of responsibility here as a clinical pharmacist. We play a major role. We play like a prominent role in antimicrobial stewardship program, infection control, as well as other programs in the healthcare systems. So basically, we'll be participating in antimicrobial stewardship. Any program, any antibiotic stewardship program without a clinical pharmacist, it's a big zero. I've seen the hospitals just for the sake of doing, just for the paperwork, they create a committee and come up with a committee which doesn't represent the pharmacy. In fact, any antibiotic stewardship program without a pharmacist, it doesn't exist. In fact, so there are three core elements, three core areas where you need to have a representation. Number one is an infectious disease specialist in any antibiotic stewardship program. There should be a active participation from the infectious disease specialist. You should have an active participation from the infectious disease specialized clinical pharmacist, as well as the representative from infection control department. So these are the core elements in any of the antibiotic stewardship program in the hospital. So basically, this is a multidisciplinary work group, which which involves some of the committees or sub-committees within the healthcare system. So what are we doing as a pharmacist for an optimal antimicrobial stewardship program? As a pharmacist, we really encourage the multidisciplinary collaboration within the healthcare system to ensure that the prophylaxis, empirical, and therapeutic use of antimicrobial agents. This is one area actually where the things could go wrong, because you might see many instances. For example, a medication antibiotic has been started as just like a prophylaxis, say like for a procedure or a surgery, and it's been never reviewed and will be continued for so many days until someone find it out or until the patient go home. So prophylaxis need to be defined, and you need to monitor how many doses you're going to give for the prophylaxis. Ideally, for a clean surgery or a clean procedure, that means if there is no infection, pre-existing infections, the patient need to get only like one dose post-operatively, that's it. And there is no recommendation in most of the cases to go beyond 24 hours of prophylaxis. And the empiric therapy could go for like 72 hours, or therapeutic uses, it depends on the indication. There could be short-term therapies, like for example, 5 to 7 days in certain medication, or for certain indication, it might go up to 6 weeks or sometimes even beyond that. For example, for the situations like endocarditis, minimum you will go with the 6 weeks therapy. Clinical pharmacists work closely with within the P&D committees, the Pharmacy and Therapeutic Committee, which may include the infectious disease subcommittees. We have a lot of subcommittees which will be reporting to the Pharmacy and Therapeutic Committee, and they will ensure that the number of the medication, the therapeutic agents are available in the hospital, which is appropriate for that particular environment and for the patient. We operate multidisciplinary concurrent antimicrobial stewardship program that uses patient outcomes to assess the effectiveness of antimicrobial use policies throughout the healthcare system. And after doing all these things, you can just generate like hundred of data, actually millions of data. So the question is like how you're going to analyze this data, and then how to utilize this data for the benefit of the patient community, and how to use this data for the economic purpose, for the budgeting purpose, in fact. And also you work closely with the microbiology lab to ensure that appropriate microbial susceptibility tests are reported in the timely manner. This is very important, reporting in timely manner. If you don't have the reporting culture and sensitivity report on time, then you might treat the patient without knowing anything. So reporting on time is very important. And you collaborate with the laboratory infectious disease specialist and the infection preventionist for compiling such susceptibility report. So basically, most of the hospital, they publish the antibiogram. They publish the antibiogram based on this report at least twice in a year. So these are the areas where the clinical pharmacists participate in antimicrobial stewardship program in the hospital. Another newer topic is the opioid stewardship programs. Certain hospitals, there are a few hospitals which already started in the US. It's a coordinated program that promotes appropriate use of opioid medications. The purpose is again to improve the patient outcome and reduce the misuse of opioids. So we, the pharmacists, can play a major role in helping to address the opioid crisis. So many of the patients, they end up with opioid crisis that is currently it's already happening in certain countries already. So we are a part of from the healthcare team, and especially in the acute care settings as well as in the pharmacies, we are well positioned to manage the medications, educate the providers, patients, and the families on appropriate use of opioids and decrease the diversion. So the issue is that misuse of drugs and also the drug diversion. So the key focus on opioid stewardship program is to educate the staff, the pharmacists, and other healthcare providers. Remember, the misuse of opioid medications are very common in healthcare providers, the hospital staff even. So that's something you need to have a very clear policy about it. So what we're going to do in any of the opioid stewardship program is that you educate the fellow clinicians and you create some of the policies and implementing guidelines. So you come up with the proper guidelines how to manage each opioid therapy in the hospitals and at the time of discharges. And you need to speak about the non-pharmacological methods of pain management or non-opioid methods of pain management. You might be using some of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs if possible, considering that the kidney is safe for the patient. But again, it depends, and you need to tailor it individually, case by case. We need to limit the home discharge medications, so limit the number of doses which you give along with the discharge medications, especially the opioid medications. Monitoring is very important, monitoring the prescribing patterns from the physicians. And you need to really look at the outliers, who is deviating from the policy, who is deviating from the approved guidelines in the hospital. So you might really need to target some of those physicians, because what's happening with those physicians, that could be a possible chance of misuse. And finally, home use of naloxone. Some of the areas in the US, they already started giving the naloxone as a take-home medication, naloxone injection, in fact, so that if something happens at home, if there is, so for example, symptoms of opioid toxicity happens at home or during the work, they can really revert it using the naloxone injection. And also, we conduct the opioid medication stewardship reconciliation during the transition of care between the levels. For example, patient transfer from in and out of ICUs during the admissions and discharges. Some of the medication will stop while transferring the patient. So basically, a proper reconciliation is mandatory for to avoid such misuse as well as the diversions and the appropriate use of the medication. And in most of the scenarios, in most of the hospital settings, you will restrict certain medications to certain specialty. For example, say fentanyl transdermal patches. Most of the hospitals, they restrict for the oncology patients, for the hematologists and oncologists only. So only those physicians with a certain specialty can be prescribing those medications. So we call it as a specialty restrictions. So this is for the safety, and we call it as, this is one of the terminology used in the medication safety, what we call it as a forcing functionality. So system will not allow them to prescribe if you don't have proper credentials or specialties to use those medications. So, and you can have even a prescription opioid take back program. So if there is a left out medication in the home, those medication could be misused by others, even family members or the patient itself. So you can offer a program for those patients and family to take back this medication and destroy it safely in the hospital. Addiction management is another area we need to focus. Addiction as well as abuse management programs. We should have a clear program for that. These are all the part of opioid stewardship program. So, and daily review as well as the feedback to the prescriber, because we already mentioned about the outliers. We really need to look at the prescribing patterns from the physicians. And if there is an outliers, if you feel that there is a misuse from the staff itself, you need to address those staff directly. Certain areas in the precision medicine, for example, pharmacogenomics is other area of focus for the pharmacists nowadays. One of the typical example is, patients with, say, for example, cardiac interventions, coronary interventions, in fact. One of the medication which is popularly prescribed for this patients as antiplatelet therapy. So dual antiplatelet therapy is very common in those patients appearing for the stenting. We give aspirin along with the Plavix or the clopidogrel. So the basic dose is like we give, as we mentioned in the previous slide, that the 300 milligram as the stat dose, that's the immediate dose. If the patient is going for a cardiac procedure after like 6 hours, if it is like an immediate procedure, you have to go with a higher dose because patient need to achieve the therapeutic levels immediately. We can go up to 600 milligram of clopidogrel. And then followed by, after the placement of the stent, we'll continue with the doses like 300 milligram, 75 milligram once daily. So this is a routine dose. And even though patients takes these medications, dual antiplatelet therapy regularly without any interruption, there is no issue of non-compliance. Still, you see some of these patients coming back to the hospital with occluded stent. The reason is that it's your genetics. The only reason is it's your genetics. So clopidogrel is metabolized by one of the enzymes, what we call it as CYP2C19. It's a hepatic enzyme. So variation in the concentration of or the production of this hepatic genotype or the enzyme, it alters the pharmacokinetic of the drugs. So some of these patients might be ultra rapid metabolizers. They rapidly metabolize the drugs. Some of them may be extensively metabolizing the drugs. Some of the persons or some of the patients might be like intermediate metabolizers. Some of the patients could be poor metabolizers. That means if you receive a patient who is really ultra rapid metabolizers, there's a good chance for this kind of patients to come back with an occluded stent because patient will not be able to maintain the proper serum level of the drugs. So they might end up with an occluded stent. So basically what's happening is that you just do a genotyping at the time of pre-admission or at the time of admission, then you can identify the ultra rapid metabolizers, extensive metabolizers, intermediate metabolizers, poor metabolizers, and then you can individually create a specific dosing plan for these patients. Other area for clinical pharmacy service or the medication therapy management is the counseling of targeted population, or we already mentioned about the disease management, etc. So most of the hospital nowadays, they focus on the patient admitted with acute coronary syndrome. They see all the patients individually. They speak to the patient. They explain the medication to the patients at the bedside before the discharge and during the admission, the clinical pharmacist. And the patient admitted with heart failure. So specifically, the patients admitted with the heart failure patients. So one of the major reason for readmission for the heart failure patient is that non-compliance to the medication, especially to the non-compliance to the diuretics. So a patient come up with the fluid overload and they might get readmitted, and the frequent admissions are very common, and that will put a lot of financial implications on the organization, especially when you provide the free care, say like our government hospitals, etc. So you need to really reduce the 30 days readmissions for this kind of patient. So one of the strategy you can make is to counsel the patient, explain the patient how important it is to take the medication, how important it is to maintain the patients on diuretics, what is the timing, better timing to do a diuretic, and what's the best way you need to maintain the fluid restriction for this kind of patients. And the patient discharging after the coronary artery bypass grafting, patient discharging after transaortic valve replacement, or patient admitted with acute stroke, etc. So you can, based on your hospital, what are the specialties you have. For example, you can target the patients who is for dialysis, patients for certain surgical procedures, for example, the bariatric surgery. So it's purely based on what are the specialties your hospital is providing for the patient. So you can plan your counseling, targeted counseling for the patient population. Ultimately, from all these activities, what are we expecting? So what is expected from our day-to-day clinical pharmacy activities or medication therapy management or clinical pharmacy activities on our day-to-day practice? The ultimate aim is to reduce the mortality of the patient, decrease the length of treatment. You just get rid of the patient, discharge the patient as early as possible, so that there won't be much financial implication on the patient family as well as for the organizations. Minimize the length of hospital stay, decrease the morbidity, as well as decrease the adverse effects from the medication therapy. So these are the expected outcome from any of the clinical pharmacy services in the hospitals. So we talk about a lot of activities like therapy management, medication therapy management, and parental nutrition, on the consultation services, the parental nutrition, anticoagulation services, etc., etc. But the key focus is our documentation part. The documentation is very important, and I always keep saying that medication or the patient documentation, the documentation on the patient file is very important, and imagine that's a legal document. There could be a reason to take those documents to the court. So make sure that you provide a very clear documentation, a very precise one, and to the point, and very professional documentation. So there are various ways where you can document the things in the patient file, which is your routine clinical intervention need to be documented. And we do a lot of daily progress note on the patient when we do the medication review for the patient. So you need to have a daily progress notes. And if you have been consulted for a special services, for example, kinetic services or the anticoagulant services or the behavioral health, etc., or the parental nutrition, so you need to have a consultation note placed on the patient file. Again, very descriptive in soft format. And also, we all participate in the multidisciplinary rounds. So basically, you should have a document of multidisciplinary rounding notes in the patient file. Documentation, again, documentation is one of our key role in the patient file, and that's a legal document. So we talk about the different functionalities as well as specialized services, and you might find some barriers in implementing such service in the hospital, especially in the Indian context. When you try to implement such a services in our hospital, especially in our Indian hospitals, financial part will be the first question you might receive from the managers. But this question may not arise in other countries, because most of the other countries, they focus mainly on the patient safety. And it's been proven that the presence of clinical pharmacy services is very important for a safe patient transition. So we really rarely, some of the managers, they don't ask for the financial implications, because the money you spend for an employee will be much less than what you pay for the patient if there is a medication error. So resources could be an issue in the hospitals. Staffing, you should have a well-trained pharmacist staff for supporting such. Certified clinical pharmacists for implementing any of those services. You need to really train them. You need to get certification from some of the boards, etc., to run those specialized services. You need to have a proper data management with the patient as well as the partner group. For example, could be another issue in the Indian context, where obtaining the patient-related data is much difficult because we don't have a clear electronic data system. We don't have electronic health records in most of the systems here. So that could be a real big task for the pharmacist. Communication is the core value for the pharmacist, as we already discussed. So the pharmacist, the one who is sitting in the pharmacy counter to the one who is working in the critical care areas, the communication is most important. And again, if you are a good communicator, you are a successful person in pharmacy. And also, you might find, as I mentioned earlier, you might find some difficulties in developing partnerships with the inpatient as well as ambulatory care, because we have a very fragmented healthcare system, because we got a lot of hospitals which don't communicate each other, which don't transfer the data to each other. So communication, again, between different healthcare systems and the hospitals or the clinics or the pharmacies will be a bit difficult. The only reason is that we don't have electronic healthcare records. So these are some of the barriers in implementing services, but specifically in Indian context, you might need to expect some of the resilience or resistance from the physician community itself, because you really need to have a lot of discussion about the targeted program with the clinician community. And finally, pharmacist operated specialized services are an integral part of any of the advanced healthcare system. It's really common nowadays in most of the countries. And for that, we need well-trained, certified clinical pharmacists to run. I mean, no one can just run a clinical anticoagulation services. That's going to risk the patient life itself. So you need to have a well-trained, well-experienced pharmacist to do such services. And finally, we need to look at the outcome. So the purpose of all these activities are, we need to target for the better outcome for the patient satisfaction. And we all knew that the pharmacist's timely intervention reduces the drug-related adverse events, including the polypharmacy, drug interactions, and any other drug-related issues. It's been proven by the studies. And the most important thing is that collaborative practice, we should have a multidisciplinary system which value each and every members of the multidisciplinary professions, or each and every professions, to deal with the patients to achieve a common therapeutic goal. And thank you so much once again for inviting me for such a wonderful session.
Thank you so much, sir, for your detailed presentation on medication management system. Really, it is a useful one. And I hope that every students who attended here, they will utilize this. The other students who are not able to attend here, they can see the YouTube video. Definitely, this is a very depth detail about the medication management, sir. Generally, we know the outline of it and how you are really doing there, and what is the importance of pharmacist. What are the areas are there to focus on that particular related to the pharmacy field? You have explained very well. Once again, thank you so much, sir. Sir, on behalf of our student, I would like to ask some questions, sir. Sir, what about the opportunities for PharmD students, sir? Especially, they used to focus on European countries, or they try to go with Canada or USA. They are not much focusing about the Middle East countries. I don't know what is the reason. Generally, the pharmacists, B.Pharm and M.Pharm students are focusing and they are moving, but PharmD students are not preferring to come over there. What about the opportunities for them, sir, especially for their qualification related to the clinical aspect? What are all their opportunities are there, and how they can be approached? Just you can give a brief about it, sir.
Okay, that's a really good question, and I get this question always from in any end of every presentation. I think one thing we need to understand at this point of time is that each and every countries, they are looking at India now. Do we know what is our population here in India? 130 crores, right?
Yes, sir. Huge.
Okay. The turnover of our patients in India, in the Indian hospital healthcare system, is too high. And I think our young pharmacists need to focus on our market, in fact, first thing. I've seen a lot of persons talking about the ADR reporting. These are all like, something happens once a while. The focus should be on the patients. The day-to-day activities of a clinical pharmacist, that should be the focus. How many of our pharmacists are going for the daily rounds? How many of our pharmacists have the routine access to the patient file? This is very important. Yes, I agree the fact that there are opportunities in certain countries. Yes, but again, this is a bit limited nowadays because they try to accommodate as much as possible their own citizens nowadays. Okay, you might find opportunities in the countries like Canada. Yes, there are possibilities, but the market, Indian job market, is totally new for this profession. Imagine we produce, Indian pharmaceutical companies produce high quality medications. Everybody says that India is the pharmacy of the world. And we have proved during the COVID session, actually, that during the pandemic session, we exported the medication for the rest of the world. That medications are really good. Those medications come to the hospitals. Those medications come to the display of the community pharmacies. And then what happens? Anybody thought of patients? No one. So this is your opportunity, actually. The opportunity for a community pharmacist in India is approximately 2,000 to 3,000 billion US dollars. It's a market opportunity. That's a huge, huge market, which no one in fact touch. Yes, we have community pharmacies, but no one is running a professional community pharmacy system in India. You might find some of the resilience, some of the oppositions from the certain communities when you start working. Yes, it is possible. It's just because of they don't know why you are implementing this system. Again, back to the previous presentation, Dr. Mohan's presentation, communication is a core value. When we implement such programs, the clinical pharmacy program in hospital, do we communicate with the physician community what we are trying to do? Most of the hospitals, they don't do that. The pharmacy institutions, they play like independent bodies, and they try to implement something which is not appropriately positively communicated to the physician community, and then they try to defend on that. This is what exactly happening. So if you go to the hospital, if you go to the other countries, like including ASHP, they don't conduct a program for the pharmacists. They conduct program for the healthcare professionals. They invite the doctors. They invite the representative from the nursing. Because you cannot have a program in pharmacy only, because pharmacy is a part of multidisciplinary, group. You need to have your counterparts in the program. You need to have the pharmacists, nurses, and the clinicians. These are the core group. They should be a part of that. So once again, yes, there are opportunities in many countries, but if you look at the Middle Eastern countries, it's not as expected before. It's just because of that they have too many pharmacy colleges in those countries also. They have a lot of indigenous graduates coming out, so they have to accommodate. So this is the reason. Okay, and once again, their clinical pharmacy programs, they don't run the PharmD, B Pharm programs or BS Pharm anymore. Most of these countries, there are few universities, but most of them they don't do that anymore. They just do the PharmD programs, and most of these PharmD programs have well-defined clinical programs. Actually, most of them are accredited to ASHP. So it's well-defined. Well-trained clinical pharmacists are coming out now from these countries. So you need to look at that. So I really want the pharmacists, the young budding pharmacists, to look at the local market first, get the experience, and think about the foreign opportunities. It's good to have foreign experience, but again, our opportunities are not tapped, in fact.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Once again, I'm thanking you with the short span of time you have accepted, and you have prepared a nice detailed PPT for us. Thank you so much, sir. In future also, we are expecting your cooperation with our institution.
No problem. Thank you once again. Thank you so much for your kind invitation. And actually, personally, I'm a person who's really interested to interact with the young pharmacists, in fact. And even when I travel to India, most of the time, I end up with some of the colleges through my, my old classmates. So yes, we do that a lot of time. So interaction is really one of my area actually.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, students, for your patient listening. Everyone, you can get your e-certificate. Just you go to our YouTube, and there you can find the link for the e-certificate. Fill the feedback form, and after submitting your feedback form, automatically you can get your e-certificates.
Well, do we have any questions from the student community?
Yes, sir. I will ask. Any student, if you want to interact with sir, please you raise your hands and I can unmute you. Okay, at any time, if you want to interact with sir, please you contact me. I can give the contact detail of sir,
Sure,
and definitely is very much.
I'm open for any communication. I'm active in social media. In fact, you can find me in either LinkedIn or in Facebook. So feel free to contact me. Once again, thank you so much for providing this opportunity, and wish you all the best for the young budding pharmacists for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Swapna. Thank you.